Hello, everyone. It looks like we are live on episode number 24 of Fan Fuel. It's going to be about the Atlanta Repave and the tweet that broke the sport. Well, maybe. We don't know yet. So, when we get into it, we'll be talking about that very controversial tweet from our very own Nathan Ball. But tonight we're joined by Colton Cranmore, as always, and Jared Bakaisa. You saw him a couple episodes ago. And, of course, my name is Alex Harrington. Welcome to this show. We've got a lot to go through. It might be a little bit of a longer show. So, guys, before we get into it, I got showed up today. You see, everyone in here except for me is wearing a hat. So, I have to say that they're all wearing a little bit retro hat. So, I had to go digging in my closet. So, I'll do that too. I hate hats, but hey, I'll wear mine.
Okay, I see.
Martin's last ride, number 6 hat.
I like to see.
Oh yeah.
I'll join in on the fun. So, got 2 Roush Racing hats and a JGR hat, and I'm not really sure what hat are you wearing, Nathan?
A Daytona Speedway hat, actually.
Okay.
Did you just call mine a Roush racing hat?
That is a Bill Elliott's own hat,
Its
isn't it?
name was, to be quite honest with you. I don't remember it. Like what?
Dude,
It was just like
the whole time until I heard his episode on the Scene Ball, I thought that was a Roush racing car, and so I went back to being a little kid and thinking that was a Roush racing car. That was definitely his own team.
So Bill Elliott owned Roush. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. He was definitely driving a Roush car, according to my 3 and 4-year-old self.
I was negative, probably 5 years old.
All right, well, we started off really good. I've already made my first mistake, so get ready to call me out for some more later on. Let's get right into it. We had a bunch of racing this weekend in NASCAR. We had 3 main events. We had some heat races as well. We got down and dirty with the trucks, but we're going to go ahead and start with Woke or Joke. We're going to have a different little feel to it this week. So we'll go Colton, Jared, Nathan, then myself. So first up, with the trucks being at Knoxville, Woke or Joke, they chose to go to Knoxville over Eldora.
fucking joke. Complete joke. Eldora had, multiple lanes to race at. It was a very well prepared track. And then Knoxville, granted, it's a flatter track than Eldora. Eldora is kind of that high banked half mile dirt, whereas Knoxville is, I think it's a little bit shorter, but it's super flat. So when you get these heavy trucks just kind of floating around on there, they definitely set in the ruts and rubber the track up pretty quick. And that's exactly what we saw, was trucks sticking to the bottom, and then you eventually saw guys just running over each other all night. The Knoxville race I didn't think was terrible. We'll get into that. But over Eldora, I don't think there's any track I'd take over Eldora in terms of dirt.
I'll go against the grain. I'll say Woke, just for the fact that they're trying to branch out their different areas, going down to Knoxville for a dirt race. I guess it gives that area a little bit of a different view of scenery and at least get to see NASCAR trucks racing rather than having nothing. I mean, it'd be nice for them to go, stay at Eldora, because that was always, like Colton was saying, that always has good racing and it's always had a good show out. But it was nice to see them go to a different area just to get that area and taste of some NASCAR truck racing.
Yeah, it's tough for me, but I'm gonna have to go Joke just because I think Eldora went pretty well over their races. Like Colton said, there was good racing there. Even when they weren't wrecking every 5 laps or whatever, it felt like it was pretty good racing. You could see guys move around, and I wish Knoxville could find a way to do that a little better, because it's probably harder to do it on the flatter surface.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go Joke. Like Colton said, big, heavy cars don't really produce good races on flat dirt tracks as it is. So we've just done that with the series that we take in there that doesn't even race on dirt except for once a year, now twice with Bristol. The Bristol race worked because Bristol is high banked, and the Eldora race worked because it is high banked and they know what they're doing. They have had 5 or 6 years of preparation. Each year the race surface got better, which provided more lanes and better races as we went on. Even back to the first and second races, we saw guys climbing the fence because that's where they had to be, and that really wasn't indicative of good racing. But as we moved on, we saw better and better races here. Having a clean slate on a track that I don't think produces very good late model racing with even heavier cars with the trucks, I don't see why they thought that it would be very good. I'm sure they could do something about it, but we'll have to play around with formats and how many cars are on track and all kinds of different stuff to get this to actually work. I don't think it's a bad idea to be at Knoxville, but over Eldora, it was a terrible, terrible idea, and it's kind of petty from NASCAR, in my opinion, to not go back to Eldora. Next up is the format of the heat races, and that was 10 trucks. You get a point for position. You finish, that's 1 point for last, 10 points for first, and as many cars that you pass, you get additional points, and that's how they set the field for the feature. So work or joke on the heat race and its formats.
I'm going to go joke just because there's no purpose to the heat races. They started all the trucks anyway. There wasn't no knockout. There wasn't a B main and an A main. They basically just qualified in a pack.
Right.
You know, I mean, and what it did was it took away, however many laps they raced in the heats away from good track conditions, away from really good racing that we would have seen. Because in the heats, we saw them fan out. We saw multiple grooves. The bottom was working. The top was working. And then, I mean, first 25 laps of the race, after that, the track just kind of set to the bottom. Jared, you did mention that they brought racing to a new area. Iowa Speedway is like 25 miles from there.
Oh, I guess. Okay, yeah, you're right. You're right.
But joke.
Yep, I'll agree with Colton on that one. If you're going to have the whole field in the race, like, there's absolutely no point in doing that. Whereas you could just either make the race a little bit longer or have a. It'd make more sense if they were like eliminating guys and be like, all right, you're done for the night, or you're not making the race or something. But it's just a waste of time, honestly, where you could have better racing the whole time rather than heat races that don't really mean anything besides points.
Yeah, I can't agree with you guys anymore. I don't understand the logic behind it if you're just going to start everyone. You saw a couple trucks actually not even finish the heat races. Like Nemechek just pulled off and said, yeah, we're done, because I think they were in a different truck and they had a couple laps and like, we don't need to take this risk and race if we're already in the show. So like they said, there's teams even out there that are seeing the same thing we are.
Yeah, I'll say this, all of us, unanimous joke. Having the heats the same day, I thought was kind of dumb, because like you said, the track just got worse and worse over the night. And then of course not eliminating anybody. I also feel like a random draw for the heats was kind of stupid. You had practice times. You could have inverted the field based on that, and that would have made the points matter more, because you would have had guys that were ridiculously slow all night start up front, have a chance to get in that feature. We could have saw a fifth 15-lap race for a B main, maybe take the top 5 out of each race and started 25 trucks, and it would have been a good event. I know they don't want to do that because sponsors and all this other stuff, but if you're going to say all that stuff for sponsoring and everything, then, tough diddly. Like, just don't have heat races. I think it was a wasted effort, like you guys said, and overall, I enjoyed the racing in them, but it was just kind of pointless. Yeah. So let's move on to the truck race itself. What did you guys think as a whole, the Knoxville truck race, woke or joke?
I'm on the fence because I have to divide this up. I thought the first part of the race was great. Even once the bottom started to really become dominant and we saw every single truck move down there, I liked it until about the last 20, 30 laps, and then it just became a complete shit show. But seeing the bottom dominate so much just reminded me of the old Bristol, where that was the one lane. You either had to get down there and get in front of someone on the straightaway, or you had to move them out of the way. And that's a lot of what we saw in the truck race. But again, it shit the bed last 20 or so laps, and then we just kept having restart after restart after restart. So that really kind of dampened it for me.
Yeah, I agree with Colton on that one. I think towards the end it was just more of a circus with playoff points and playoff spots on the line. 40 trucks there. Like one of those guys at the back, like, I might just send it into turn 1 and try to get a playoff spot, because obviously the truck field doesn't have as many top competitors in there, and they also don't have that many races. So whenever you go to a wild card track, like a track that you've never gone to, you're obviously just going to take as many risks as you can, and like, may as well send it,
Yeah, I would agree. I think the first few parts of the race were really good, but the last 20 laps probably took as much as the entire first half of the race combined. So I just wish that they would have figured something out later in the race because just the same way you guys said, it just wasn't really compelling toward the end because they would literally go one corner and they would wreck. It would just be rinse and repeat until eventually they made it one corner. So
Yeah, and it was rough. That really was rough. The last hour or so of the broadcast was just start and stop and start and stop and start and stop. And from an outsider's point of view, that's unacceptable. If I'm tuning in just to watch my first truck race and I'm like, oh well, there's only 30 laps left, and then I sit down and I'm still there an hour later. Woohoo! Like there's carnage, but I mean, it's not really legitimate at that point. So really, as a whole, just because of the finish, I'm going to have to say joke. Like it erased any part of the rest of the race that was good. And with that being said, I mean, we had 40 trucks out on the racetrack, and we saw pretty much all of them get into an accident at the end. And driver of the number 42 truck for Nice Motorsports is Carson Hocevar. And he basically, his quote post-race was essentially that we were making a joke of ourselves and that the dirt community was going to just sit there and laugh at us because of the carnage that had just ensued. So for Carson Hocevar's general idea of his comment was that we made a joke of ourselves to dirt fans and the rest of the dirt community. Is that a woke or joke statement?
That is woke. We made a joke of ourselves, not because of the track conditions or because of how we raced the track. It's because of how we saw these truck series guys race each other. Dirt series guys, they all have a code because, I mean, the cars are mostly open wheel. They tend to flip quite a bit. And so they all have the kind of this code that they race by, and they all kind of grew up with it. And you did not see anything of the sort in the truck race, and that's what made it a joke. So woke for Carson Hocevar.
Yep, same on that. Can't disagree with Colton on that. It was just an embarrassment, kind of. Like you were saying, Alex. There's 30 laps left. You're like, oh, I'm here another hour later just to see all these wrecks or whatever. Like, no one really wants to watch that. Like, a couple's like okay, but like when it gets to lap after lap after lap, it's like, oh, come on, let's get this over with. Or how long until they wreck? And those types of situations. So woke on Carson's comments. So
yeah, I would agree. I think that there was no give and take principle to that type of racing. It's literally just all take. At what point they don't really realize, hey, we got to make it to the finish if you want to win the race. And people are like, no, I want to win the race in turn one with 40 laps left. Like that's just, I don't understand it. It's sad. I think part of it, like you said, is probably down to the win and in system, but it just wasn't a good look for anyone.
Yeah. So I'm going to kind of go off script just a little bit here. I know that we had talked earlier in the year about the dirt race at Bristol and then the COTA race as well being rain shortened. Rain shortened, but just plagued by rain, and NASCAR in both of those, due to visibility, went to single file restarts. So we had said on that show, I don't remember which one it was. Maybe it was both of them after both of those races. That why don't we just make dirt races and road courses that are raining restarts on single file? I think that holds bar, and I think NASCAR could have done, a lot more with this race had we had single file restarts. But with that being said, knowing that we all kind of share that opinion, what is something that we could have done to prevented this, at all, not just with the single file restarts?
The single file restarts would have been a huge one. Another thing that we need to implement, or I think they should implement, is a move to the back rule. At my local short track, if you dump someone, or if you get someone's quarter panel, even if they cut you off, if you're involved in the wreck, or if you're involved at the start of the wreck, you get moved to the back. You do not get to keep your spot in 6th, in 10th, or wherever. You get put back of the line. You'll see an official come out just like the Kurt Busch, and they'll tap their bottom real quick and point at you to send you to the back. And so I think that really would have helped us out here, because you wouldn't have had the guys that are a dart without feathers up there in 10th, spinning someone out, and then causing a huge pile behind him.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And something people realize with the single file restarts is that the bottom groove was dominant the entire night. So part of it had to do with guys that were restarting on the top. They didn't want to be there. So their first instinct wasn't to get moving. It was just to cut down to the bottom. Whether someone was there or not, they were just going to force their way into a hole that really wasn't big enough for their truck. So I think if they went single file, there'd be a lot less desperation that would get cut out because guys wouldn't literally have to run each other over for one piece of real estate.
Yep, I agree with both of those guys. And Colton, I've seen that at my local short track. I actually saw it at the Cars Tour race whenever Corey Heim kind of dumped one of the guys, and he just got sent to the back right after that. All the fans were cheering. And like, maybe just try to take control of the race at least. That kind of sent a message there because that was towards maybe 30 to go or somewhere in that range. So I think all the other drivers got the message like, oh, kind of got back off a little bit. Don't really want to try to get into someone and get sent to the back. So I think that's something where you just got to try to control the race. You see like a couple incidents in a row that are sort of the same thing. I think that's when like race control needs to be, hey, you guys need to settle down here. Just start throwing black flags at people and send them to the back.
Yeah, and something that we do is, I mean, I hadn't even thought of that, even though I've done it before, is sending people to the back. If you've been involved in an accident. But also there's limits. I know these are a lot longer races than your normal 25, 35 lap Saturday night shootout. But we have incident limits as well, like no fault or fault, depending on the series that's in town and what the racetrack itself's rule is. If you're in 3 incidents, we put you into the garage. Sorry, go to pits. We don't want you out here. You're ruining our racetrack, right? So that's something that could be done. Another thing, we talked about it with the heats. If we're gonna have heat races, get rid of cars. I think just the fact that there was 40 cars on this track, something that doesn't happen very often, if not at all, in dirt racing, is there's usually a maximum of 28 cars. Maybe there's some special shows on mile-long tracks where you've got more than that. But I don't see any reason to have any more than 28 cars on a feature in a dirt race. I'll say this for Eldora as well. 40 trucks is just too many cars to be on track. And I think that would have fixed everything.
Yeah, and something else that came to mind too was, I don't know what they talk about in the hollers, all right? And none of us do. If you get called to the holler after the race, we hear it all the time. But it used to be a big thing. We would always hear in the broadcast, so-and-so got called to the holler. It was kind of like, oh, shit, And now it's just kind of, you see it every other week. Someone will get called to the holler. Right. Next week they're doing the same shit. So I don't know. Mike Hilton probably isn't there for the Knoxville truck race. They need someone in there to really put the fear of God in these guys. So, kind of Days of Thunder. Like, you aren't going to be stinking up my show. I'll pull your cards apart for 300 laps. And if you get, whatever he says in the movie, there needs to be someone in there to put the fear of God in these kids.
Right. And something else in Carson's tweet was the lack of respect in the series as a whole. And you say that quote about not stinking up my show. Well, they had 5 overtimes, and they didn't get past turn 1 until the 5th overtime. So that is kind of stinking up the show. So how do we put respect in these drivers? They are all young. I mean, how do you discipline a young driver to let them know, hey, X is going to happen if you don't stop wrecking and all that kind of stuff?
This one's a tough one for me, but I know I'm probably going to get heat from the 12-year-old fans for this, but I think a lot of it has to do with the playoff format. Like, they know that back in the day, you couldn't have bad days. If you wanted to make the chase, you had to be top 10 in points or top 12 in points. You couldn't afford to have too many bad weekends in a row pile up. And now, if you're above the top 30 in points or whatever it is, you can basically go out there, DNF almost every other week. And as long as you win one lucky race, you're in. So it makes them think that, hey, it doesn't matter if we crash or not. As long as we win one week, then we're good. So I think you made bad days or DNFs actually matter to a point, you probably wouldn't have so many guys that were having the whole, winner crash mentality, because I think you take that away from them. You take the ability for them to have a bad day away, and they're probably going to be smarter.
Yeah. And to teach the respect to the kids, I don't know that there's anything you can do once they get to the NASCAR, the top 3 tiers level. That definitely comes from the short tracks, racing super late models and super stocks and everything. But I mean, to Nate's point, without stacking more gimmicks on, the only thing you're going to be able to do is take away some gimmicks. Take away that winner in, because if I've already won a race, say I won the second race of the year, I'm just going to go out and send the mail every week and try to win everything now. If I finish last, so be it until the playoff cut.
Right. Like finishing last needs to mean something. Like
right.
It needs to have a consequence.
Exactly. I think, stacking gimmicks on top of each other, take away playoff points. If you finish below this line and you've got playoff points, guess what? You just lost one of them. You just lost 5 of them, right? That we used to see guys get docked points all the time, and it was a huge, huge deal. Mark Martin lost the title one year because of it.
Right.
If you get into an incident and NASCAR deems it serious enough, take their fucking win away. Keep the win in the record book, but take away their playoff berth. Something.
Yeah, I think like you guys said back then, say the whole point was to have as good of a day as possible every week. And if you had a bad finish or whatever, it would come back and bite you 10 weeks down the line. Mm-hmm. Whereas now it seems like you can blow an engine or whatever after dominating a race. It's like, doesn't matter. We got playoff points.
Doesn't matter until September. Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's like, you think about it, you have to figure out a way to make the ability to have a good day matter again. Like, I don't care whether you finish 5th 10 times. It's like that should matter just as much as winning once and crashing every other week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to agree with Nate on that. It's kind of like that thing where it's like those guys don't understand that a 8th place or 6th place, 5th place finish is actually good, because their mentality now is like win and in. So like, all right, I'm just going to try to send it here and I'm going to try to win this race. And then they don't win, they'll be like 25th, and it's just going to make them race even more aggressive than they need to be. Whereas if they just race clean or whatever, hey, we got a top 5. But like you were just saying, that doesn't really mean anything anymore to get a top 5.
Right.
So this might just be a systematic problem from having the playoffs, is what you guys are saying. And I think without stepping back and listening to you guys say that, I would have never thought about it that way. And so I don't know. Maybe we just need to go back to full season points and make all of us old school fans happy. I'm not sure. That's not going to happen. So NASCAR's kind of put themselves yet into another box of this is going to just be a new normal that we have to get used to. And it has become that, especially in the youngest series on the schedule. They've always talked about how tough the trucks are, how they race aggressively, how they have no rules and this, that, and the other. And all we are doing is amplifying it. And I think the guys, your guys' points are all proving to that. And speaking of that win is everything mentality, let's move to Saturday on the big track at Atlanta. And that was a monumental race for the series, for the sport. But also we had kind of a dingbat move from the 47 car of Kyle Weatherman. So Mike Harmon Racing keeping that car out. Is that a woke or joke?
I'm going to be honest. I didn't see this part of the race. I was doing a whole bunch of stuff on Saturday. I did kind of read up on it. I'm going to say woke. I mean, it got him some TV time. It got him up front. When I did pull on the race, I looked at it and thought, holy shit, the 47 car is doing so good. I even turned to my girlfriend. I was like, do you know who Kyle Weatherman is? Me neither. Like, that's awesome, And then I immediately saw him sail back. But I thought it was cool. I'm going to go woke.
Yeah, I'll go with that, too. It's kind of like that situation in California when Landon Castle stayed out. And you guys remember that race? Completely just ruined that whole line. And I was thinking, I don't even remember how old I was, maybe like 14 or 15 or something. Like, Landon Castle's going to do something if he just falls right back to the ends. But yeah, you're right, got some TV time, like, hey, I might get a top 10 out of this. But
yeah, I think it's like it's a tough thing to kind of toe the line with. I think it's a woke if you do it right. If you're able to kind of just not make a complete fool out of yourself and not either get run over or cause somebody else to get run over, then it's fine. But I think if you know that you're going to be such a sitting duck to where you're probably going to cause a wreck, then it's probably not worth it at that point, because you're probably just going to get laughed at by the rest of the garage. And they're going to be like, the top guys are going to be like, hey, look at this guy. He's a weapon. We need to stay away from him. And I think there's a line with that. And if they knew that they weren't going to be able to maintain any sort of pace in the restart, then just it's not worth it. But if they could have, got moving enough to where they weren't going to cause anything, then it would have been okay. But I don't know. I think it's just hard to choose.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a woke asterisk. So I think the move is great. I think the move is great on 99% of the racetracks in the schedule. But Atlanta with sandpaper asphalt is not a good move. I think, you saw that with, I want to say, Cole Witt in the Xfinity Series Championship
Oh,
that
yeah.
Daniel Suarez won. Everyone booed him for that. Everyone, just trolled him on Twitter and all this other stuff, and everybody was mad. And that's the only reason Daniel Suarez won the championship, is what people say. I don't necessarily agree with that, but when I look at the move, it's not late enough to work at Atlanta because of the tire wear. And honestly, he probably, if we were at Texas this week instead of Atlanta, he probably would have just moved from a 20th place position to a 5th place position because tire wear wouldn't have mattered and not that many people would have got around him in the, I want to say it was like 5 or 6 laps that were left in the race. However, he did have that suspension issue, so we'll never know exactly how much that would have helped himself. I know that crash that when they went back green put him in overtime, so it was just a lost cause because he had that suspension issue. But like I said, woke asterisk because, it's Atlanta. You don't really have the ability to do that on older tires. I think he had 25 lap older tires or something like that. So staying on Saturday's race, that is going to be yet another loss for Daniel Hemrick. I mean, what can you guys say about Kyle Busch and his move going into one? Woke or joke?
Woke on Kyle's move and also woke on Daniel losing another one. I've been hard on this train for years that, Daniel got a cup ride before he won a single NASCAR sanctioned race, and he still hasn't won one. Sure, he made it to the championship for an Xfinity, but at some point, you got to realize it's probably not luck, it's the driver. And I've said for years, I don't think he's aggressive enough to be super, super competitive in NASCAR. And it just continues to prove it. Yeah, he'll get top 5s, top 10s here and there. But he's not going to be that guy to park it in victory lane. So woke on Kyle's move to get it done. And then woke on Daniel for shit in the bed, I guess.
Yeah, as a Kyle Busch fan, I'm kind of like right in the middle on that situation. I hated that he won the race that way by kind of pushing him up the track and causing that wreck. And I'm like, oh, it's Kyle Busch, so he's going to get so much shit on social media for that. And I'm like, oh man, that's tough. And then it's also like it's his last Xfinity race. And, at that point, that late in the race, you're racing to win, so you got to do what you got to do. And he was just trying to get him a good push into the turn, and unfortunately, that stuff happened. So that's a racing deal, and he even said that on the front stretch interview that he hated it for the other guys, but got the win, and said he's going to be done now.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it was 100% a mistake by Kyle Busch. There's no question that it was a mistake. The only thing that I will say joke on is that I don't think that loss meant that Daniel Hemrick's a bad race car driver. I think that was purely situational to the point where it was, he had that race pretty much in the bag. He had a good restart. He just got a kind of awkward push, and that was it. So I think, and to Colton's point, there are many drivers out there that are very good that did not win a National Series race when they went to Cup. I think Denny Hamlin's probably the best example of this. He had 1.5 full seasons of Busch up until Cup, and he did not win a single race for Joe Gibbs. And then he goes out, he wins poles, he wins a shootout, he wins all sorts of things in Cup. So I think you never know. I think he's a bad driver. I think, like he said, part of it is just, he's not the perfect driver, but then the other part of it is it's kind of a mixed bag, I would say, right? Like on the days where he's good enough to win, sometimes he's not good enough to win. And then on the few and far between days where they do everything right, they still don't have the luck. So I think it's almost a combination, right? It's like never seems to go with either. Whenever he's good, the car's not good. Whenever the car's not good, he's not good, and so on and so forth.
One of the best quotes I ever heard was from Brett Griffin. He talked about it with Elliott Sadler when he was sponsored by M&M's in that 38 car. They sat him down after kind of a string of bad luck, and it wasn't even like he was losing races. It was just kind of really bad luck, and they sat him down and said, "I don't know how you lost your last job, but I can tell you how you're going to lose this one. I understand that shit happens, but some people are in shit more often than not." And I think Daniel's one of those guys.
Right. I don't think it's a knock on him. I think it's just the way things have fallen. Sometimes dominoes just don't go the way they're supposed to go.
Yeah, and you can say this man has the worst luck in racing, and I could probably agree to that.
I think it's
But I mean, for me, the move on him was kind of a joke. Kyle Busch has won now 102 Xfinity races. He's won 200 plus other races. He knows how to drive a car. I guarantee you, he knew that he was going to hit him wrong. That man doesn't make very many mistakes, and I hate to see him win one like that. I'm glad that I did, see him win his last Xfinity race, but I don't know. It just kills me that Daniel Hemrick can't get it done. And the days like Saturday where he had it done, shit happens. So I don't know. It's just it's upsetting to me, man.
Right. Like you said, sometimes even on the days where the driver does have the skill to get it done, things don't go your way, Like he's not the first driver that this has happened to, and he probably won't be the last, There are so many good drivers out there that just don't have things go their way. He's not the only one.
It's like Kyle Busch was making sure that he would go out with the last win there, like even at the event, pushing the limits a little bit more just to try to get a win. But
I do want to ask Colton something though. So you're saying what you said about Daniel Hemrick. Well, the same thing could be said about Matt DiBenedetto. So, I mean, what
or Ryan Blaney?
Is it just right?
Blaney's won races. I'd agree with DiBenedetto. Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess you could say the same about Blaney, right? Like he's had his share of good fortune in his wins.
He's won a race every year, including 2017 to now.
Okay, but when he got the cup, he hadn't won anything.
Fair, but you could say that
he hadn't even done.
If you find yourself in a mess more than another person, then it's their fault. Like I'm pretty sure if you told a Ryan Blaney fan that after Texas last year or Vegas last year or all the races that he went out absolutely dominated and got pretty much hosed out of by usually no fault of his own, to say that has something to do with the driver, I'm not sure I would go that far.
I mean, I'd agree with you, but we still find a way to get it done once a year. Alex, you can mute people. If he's talking over you, just say "fuck you, dude" and mute him. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm not. I don't know. I don't know, man. Maybe he just broke a lot of mirrors or walked under a ladder. He broke a mirror walking under a ladder and kicking a black cat. Like, maybe that's what happened. So I don't know.
He's a bad driver. I think he's got talent. I just think he's got to figure it out sooner than later. At this point, it's becoming a meme.
Well, they always say you can't tell you can tell a fast driver to slow down, but you can't tell a slow driver to go fast.
Can't tell.
And so this might be right where we can't see Daniel Hemrick progress because he doesn't have the oomph needed to go out there and move someone out the way or not be a pushover really on longer runs when he's in front of someone. I think he drives pretty damn good. I think he is definitely a guy you want in a lower tier Cup Series ride because you know what he's going to do. If he doesn't get any bad luck, he's going to bring that car home clean.
I mean, that's a big if, though, with Daniel Hemrick and bad luck. I mean, that's like I remember Monroe Andretti said this quote about one of his teammates. He said something along the lines of, if this guy was an Undertaker, people would stop dying. I think that's almost the case with Daniel Hemrick. I just don't think he can buy a break at this point.
I don't know that he can. But let's move on. Kyle Busch, 102 wins. We've talked about him enough, so let's talk about his wife, Samantha. She comes on Twitter, basically confirms that he is going to be retired from the Xfinity Series. So, Samantha Busch's comments, are they woke or joke? Do we believe them?
I'm going to go woke. I said woke on Kyle Busch retiring once he hits 100, once he hit the 99th earlier this year. I think he's going to stick to it. I think more time with family now that Brexton's getting older is going to be super important to him. And I think he's got too many people that are going to call him out if he tries to jump in a race for him to really find worth in that. Besides, he's got 102 wins. He's got more than double the second-place guy. He's probably going to hold that record for quite a while, if not forever, now that the new rules are in place.
Absolutely.
Yeah, super woke on it. Focus on the Cup Series now. Focus on just whooping ass in the trucks. And go from there. But yeah, I think family time is going to be a big thing for him.
Yep, I'm going to agree with that as a Cowboys fan. I think he's going to spend time on Saturdays with Brexton, just focus on Cup Series Sunday, maybe run a couple truck races on Friday nights and get a couple wins there so I can enjoy Friday nights. But yeah, I think like you've been seeing his like social media, he's always like trying to push with Brexton or whatever. You're always seeing like inside videos of him and one of Brexton's races. I think he posted a video or something of him and Brexton again today. So I think that's going to be his Saturdays, and like you were saying, family time. I think that's going to be more important moving forward. And like if Samantha posted something about it, I think that's pretty legit that he's probably done.
Yeah, I think I go woke. I think her saying it is probably a bigger confirmation than him saying it, because I think she was probably the one that didn't want him to run the super speedways anymore in the lower series. And when she said it, he stopped doing it. So if she says it, then he'll probably stop doing it again. So
Yep. Happy wife, happy life.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say. Woke or joke? That's going to be woke, because happy wife, happy life indeed. So she's the boss at home. We all know that. He might be the boss on the racetrack, but you know what? When wifey says don't race anymore, you're probably not going to race anymore.
Yeah.
Like you guys said, more time with Brexton. That's a big thing. He started his racing career. We've heard about that on Dale Jr. Download and DBC and stuff like that. We've seen it through their Twitter and Instagram feeds and stuff like that. We know that he's doing his best to be a good dad, and he can't do that if he's at the racetrack 3 days a weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good, but I will have to say for his comments post-race, that's a joke, because he told Rowdy Nation that they don't have anything to watch. They can go watch something else on Saturdays, and I think that was a terrible take from him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only thing. Still go out and watch Xfinity. It should be a little bit better without him dominating. I'm kind of on the fence. I'd rather see Cup drivers in there. We've talked about that before. But yeah, stay watching Xfinity. It's going to be great. Stay watching the trucks, even though there's no respect there. It is what it is. But moving on to Sunday, had a long race. We weren't going 500 miles. We were going 400 miles. This race was the race from Kentucky. This was Quaker State 400. So they kept it 400 miles. I think that was a very good idea to do that, to separate those two races. We still wound up having a longer race because we had a red flag at the middle because the asphalt came up. So we'll get into the repave and stuff later. But this is a personal thing that I had asked the guys prior to everything. With that red flag, we had a little bit of a break between the first two stages and the last stage. Would it be woke or joke to have a condensed red flag between the second and final stage every week?
I'm on the fence because I think NASCAR with their gimmicks would feed way into it. I think woke if you get rid of that first stage. If you just make it a two-stage race and throw a red flag and make it like a halftime, or like baseball does the seventh inning stretch. We see intermissions in other sport where you can get a whole bunch of commercials in at once.
Right.
We can kind of get up, stretch the legs, go get some drinks, go get some food. I wouldn't mind that, to be honest with you. When the asphalt started coming up, I turned to Cheyenne and I was like, hey, this is going to be a while. Like usually when this happens, it's a couple hours. And they did a really good job making it quick, but I wouldn't mind seeing that every week.
Up, Jared.
I'm like kind of with Cole. I'm literally like with Cole. I'm kind of like on the fence that I'd rather them just race and get it over with, or just I know they're not going to get rid of stages or anything or stage cautions or something, but I'd rather just the race just go out, like just race. That's how I see it. Just let them go. But also, like, I don't know, maybe like a 5-10 minute break or something, and just do like 70% of commercials on there, so then we have like the final like stretch the race is basically almost caught like commercial free, or at least limited commercials or something. That's where I would like see it. I like to see if they do something like that, but we'll see what happens moving forward.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to go joke on this one, just because we have enough breaks as is. Like people say, we have a competition caution 99% of the races. We have a stage 1, we have a stage 2. I think if you're gonna add in another break in there, then like Colton said, you either have to have no stages at all and do the halftime break, or you just don't have the halftime break, because I think it's more for fans, because these drivers, they can handle going 500 miles. It's definitely not for them. I think at that point it's for TV.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to have to go joke on my own idea because I'd rather see a full flat out, 100%. Let's go 400, 500, 600 miles every Sunday. I don't care. Race length doesn't bother me. I don't care if we sit there for 7 hours because the Southern 500 just is a caution fest, just like during 2016 with Carlington. I don't care. I want to see them go flag to flag, and if there's a yellow, have it naturally. However, I will say, if NASCAR is going to do this, we do not see the stages getting rid of cautions. Commercials. So we've got the caution flag. We've added 2 times in the race that was supposed to get rid of commercials. We're not doing that. If they decide that, hey, let's take a 5-minute red flag halfway through the race, we'll pay points at halfway, just like they do with the stages now. I could get behind it to know that I was going to be 75 to 100% caution free from there on, commercial free from there on. Excuse me. I don't like the gimmicks with the cautions, and you can see I'm stuck on that word. So I obviously hate them. So with that, it was a day race instead of a night race like it had been in Kentucky. So that is the next Walker joke. Moving this to a day race in a July heat.
Woke for the racing, joke for the fans. It probably sucked. Granted, you got a little bit of a break. It wasn't so sunny, beating down on you hot all day. But
that was a lot worse Saturday.
Yeah, if I were a fan, I definitely wouldn't like to be sitting out in that. But for the racing, I mean, it just made the track that much more slick, that much more hard to handle. So woke for the race, joke for the fans.
Yep, that's an agreeable thing too. I think if you're going to a track twice and that track has lights, maybe as for the fan experience, maybe you want to have maybe one night, one day, just because you obviously saw the situation in the stands. There wasn't that many people, and yeah, I know that it's July heat and there's a chance of rain that day. But if you add like a twist or something, maybe a Saturday night type of race or something, those fans that went to the earlier race that got to see like all how the daytime festivities and stuff work, maybe try to switch that and bring it back tonight. Because when was the last time Atlanta had their night race?
2013.
13, yeah.
14.
Yeah, somewhere in that range. I think that
because I know Casey Kane won a night race there back in 14.
Yeah, that would have been it.
Right before they switched Darlington back, yeah.
Yep, that's right, because throwback weekend started in 15. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's something where you could have maybe had a night race there. Just that'd be kind of a cool marketing thing, like Saturday night in Atlanta, or just something for the fans, and maybe you might have a few more butts in the seats compared to what we saw on TV this past weekend.
Yeah, I think I'm going to copy exactly what Colton and Jared said. I don't have anything to add other than it's a woke for a 1.5 mile track during the daytime. It's a joke for the fans.
Yep.
Okay, so I get it from a perspective that the drivers wanted it. But God, oh my God, it was sweltering hot on Saturday. If it would have been that sunny on Sunday, I was lucky enough to have shaded seats on Saturday. If it would have been that hot on Sunday all day, I'd be dead right now. I wouldn't have made it back from AMS. I'd have died right there and there. It was just disgusting, and especially after the rain had hit. If it went sunny instead of being cloudy all day, it would have been terrible. So I like day races. I particularly don't really mind night races at short tracks, but like you guys said, 1.5 miles, I would want a hotter day race. But from a fan perspective, fuck all that. Okay?
Yeah.
If we're going to go to Atlanta in July next year, it better be a Friday and Saturday night event, because that was just total chaos. I mean, I don't know how people were doing it. People were as red as my shirt after sitting out there on Saturday, and I can't do it. Maybe they were just drunk enough not to feel it till the next day, but God bless them. As far as the racing itself, I'll be honest, I was kind of bored the first 2 stages. This is exactly why I don't like stage racing. That big long run came at the end, and we saw really good long run racing. We saw comers and goers. We saw passing was a little bit more difficult for my taste all day, but we saw what we saw at the end there, and it's caused a lot of controversy. Woke or joke on Ross Chastain blocking Kyle Busch?
Woke. I mean, you're out of the same garage. We've seen more team orders the last 10 years than we did any time previously. I mean, I can't think of very many team orders that we had even before like 2005, 2008 kind of era. But since then, that's just kind of been the MO of NASCAR. If you have two cars and one of them's got a chance to win the race, the other one's damn sure going to help you do it. So I mean, I'm woke on that. It's hard to say. If I were in Kurt's position, I would want someone that's out of the same stall as me to help. So I'm probably going to go woke.
Yeah, I'm going to go woke also. I tweeted this out. Like, Ross Chastain knows the whole situation. He's racing for a ride next year, and Ganassi's shutting down at the end of the season after being bought by Trackhouse. So I understand his point of view. You know, my team's gone after this year. I need a ride. I'm gonna be a good teammate, and I'm gonna try to get my team maybe one last win, because who knows, that could be Ganassi's last win. That could even be Kurt Busch's last win. So I think he understood that situation, and that's kind of marketable moving forward, because that just shows that, hey, this guy's a team driver or whatever, regardless of controversy. And plus, when it comes to like lap traffic and stuff, like you see that all the time, regardless if they're teammates or not. Like Ross was still in the lead lap, right? So caution comes out, he's still in the lead lap rather than have the chance of getting lapped and then go lap another couple cars. And guess what? He's stuck and have to do the wave around and knock the tires or whatever. So I understand his situation. I can understand Kyle Busch's frustration. You know, it's late in the race. Let's try to let the leaders race it out. But you also have to. It's one of those things. It's hard to just choose sides without being biased. Is what it comes down to. Because I could be that. Yeah. I could be that biased Kyle Busch fan. Like, man, I hate Ross Chastain. He screwed him over a win. I'm like, well, he did, but it's a part of racing that I've come to understand over the last couple of years. So, woke on that.
I think Nate's paused.
Is Nate froze?
I think Nate freezed. So I'll go ahead and go in on woke as well.
Yeah, am I here now?
There's Nathan. Oh, he's back. So for me, it was kind of woke. I thought it was a great move. You got to do that kind of stuff. And you know what? If you're fighting for being one lap down, it's totally 100% acceptable. Yeah, you just went a lap down because you held up the second place guy that was trying to go for the lead, but that was your teammate that was passing you. That's an oh well moment. He has a lot more, I guess, I don't know, respect for me for doing that than if you would have done that and he was already 2 or 3 laps down. Even then, though, I would have understood the move, because that's your teammate who's trying to get a win. And as an organization that's shutting down, you're going to want to do that. I don't care, if you think that you're going to get the replacement ride or not. As a number 2 Trackhouse car, it doesn't matter. Like that's a move that you have to do. We've seen stuff like that. We saw the Christopher Bell, Denny Hamlin debacle at Martinsville last year. Eric Jones, you're right. Sorry. He's driving the 20 now. So. Everybody forgets about Eric. That's why he got put into the 43. So, Nathan, now that you're unfrozen.
Yeah, I think it's a tough one for me. I think that move was solely done as a thing as Ross Chastain saying, hey, Trackhouse, please hire me next year. I'm someone that will put the team over myself, that kind of thing. Because I know that for sure, at least this isn't a common thing in NASCAR, but in other forms of racing, you usually don't see guys be that big of a team player, because if your teammate is leading the race and you're a lap down, that's got to be a tough pill to swallow. Like, that's a little tough to see somebody in the same equipment as you lapping you. Like, you can't enjoy seeing that. And I think if it wasn't for the situation with Ganassi next year, I'm not sure that he would have been as eager to do that. But it's tough, because I know if I was in his shoes, I would say, look, I'm only doing this because I need a job. Like, I wouldn't do this any other week, because usually if you're racing against someone in the same stuff, you got to beat them. So I don't know what I would do. It's tough for me.
I don't know. I mean, at that point, I don't know that a late caution is going to come out or anything. So I might as well let the guy have it, because, I want my organization to do well, because that puts morale into my guys as well, because the organization does that. That puts a fire under my ass, because I know my equipment can win now. So now I have to go out and perform in the same way. Before we move on, I do want to kind of call a little bit out. So Dakota Rutledge, she says, is this a race fan podcast? The Race Kicked Ass. Now, this was directed towards me because he posted this right at.
Hang on.
Here's the thing. No, before you go, Colton, I specifically said, Dakota, that I don't like stages and that I love the last stage. The first 2 stages were boring to me only because we had the exact same problem that we did in the 4 stages of the Coke 600, a race which I also attended. We went to halfway, we pit. We went to the end of the stage, we pit. We went to halfway, we pit. We went to the end of the stage, we pit. There was no varying strategy. And I'm not here. I don't give a shit if there's cute little passes here and there on the racetrack. I want strategy racing. I'm an old school fan. I would rather run 500 miles green flag at every single racetrack and see who comes on top over the end. The race was fun in the last stage, but the first 2 blew, in my opinion, because of that.
You know what? An idea that'd be kind of cool. I know they won't do it, but it's just me thinking out loud here. What if they still had stage cautions, but they didn't open pit road?
Oh,
that's something that we've talked about.
That's something that
really makes sense. Honestly, I like it, but I don't as well because they're still just re-wrecking the field for no reason at that point.
Yeah, like I think the Indy 500 this year, I know it's not a NASCAR race, but that race had what? It had 1 non-incident caution, and the other caution was for a loose wheel like that. Yep. And the race was probably one of the best Indy 500s in the last 20 years.
Yeah,
and that race
about it earlier.
Pretty much went organically for the whole way, and I thought it was a great race. I think at some point, if you're going to go 500 miles naturally, like there's still a chance for a good race. I think the only thing that gets me with the stages is that they're, you might not see the guys pushing if it's for a stage because they're like, hey, we're going to bring a caution. We're going to get our pit stops and all that kind of stuff. If you go 500 miles from the start, you're going to see a lot more strategy. So yeah. I think I'm
keeping the points in, the strategy goes up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Since Dakota,
so I'm actually in a group chat with Dakota. It's like me, Dakota, Rattlesnake, Jacob, and Trekken, and then I think like Johnny Thomas. He only chimes in like once a month. Dakota, if you're still watching, this has been a recurring joke in our group chat for like 4 or 5 days now. Is that Dakota will think any race is badass as long as he's at it, which I agree. Races in person are a hell of a lot better than on TV. However, not every race kicks absolute ass. This one, I'd agree with you. I mean, first 2 stages were kind of dull. And I told him like the Atlanta race was fairly good towards the end. But I mean, that's just kind of a recurring joke that any race that Dakota goes to, I mean, he goes to like fucking 30 of these things a year.
Did he go to the Coke 600?
What's that?
Did he go to the Coke 600?
Yeah.
If he thought that race was badass, then he's not a real race fan.
I don't know.
Fucking trash.
Really now.
Anything like he hated the Knoxville truck race, which I see his point of view on. Just because it was kind of a shit show at the end. But any race that he's at, he's gonna say it's absolutely badass. I could take him to a goddamn mini stock race out in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and he'd think it's the coolest thing ever.
I'm glad that he's so positive and has so much fun. I can't do that. I'm too analytical. Speaking of being analytical, let's move on to our next topic. We talked about this Tuesday night before the press release last week. NASCAR, has just totally just gone crazy over this. And I think it's a little bit ridiculous to call out these people. But SMI and AMS are going to reprofile Atlanta Motor Speedway. Now, to preface this, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think the repave is a good thing. I think that I think you would all agree after Sunday's race that we need to repave the track. The disconnect is between whether or not we think the reconfiguration is good. There's a mixed bag in the industry, honestly, and then outside of the industry, it's even more mixed bag. I'm a part of the person that is not going to say we don't need to try new things. As far as I'm concerned, SMI is the company out of the 2 that has our backs. They try to make the fan experience better as far as the racing. So we've done Bristol Dirt, we've done the Roval, we've done the Texas and Kentucky reconfigurations, and we've done PJ1, all because of SMI. Whether or not you agree with any of those changes is up for your opinion. However, the fact that they're doing those things to provide better racing, even if it doesn't work, is something I think we can't be bullying them for just because they're doing it again. And as far as I'm concerned, when we get to the Texas repave, it's fine as long as we don't have this trash package that we're using now. And I don't know. It could have put on better racing with an
I don't know.
850 horsepower.
I feel like the thing is, I agree with what you're saying that change is okay, but I think that you can't use change to justify breaking what doesn't need to be broken at the same time. And I think Atlanta was one of those racetracks where, hey, yes, it needs to be repaved, but maybe it doesn't need to be reconfigured if it's a driver's track and they all love it. It's like taking let's just throw a track out there. Let's just say Monaco, for example. It's not the best entertainment race, but the drivers all seem to like the circuit. And if they said, hey, we're going to add 15 more corners to the track just to try something new, I don't think there'd be a lot of support for it, the same way there isn't a lot of support for this. And
right. Well, let me ask you a question. Since 2015, since they were initially going to repave it, and they listened to the drivers every year, let's not repave it, let's not repave it, let's not repave it.
Right, but
if you go back to 2015 and you go to now, how many races do you think were good races at Atlanta? Because from my perspective, being at my home track, the only two that were decent as well as the pre-2015 races were the two that we saw this year. So
right,
I don't know. If you can't sell tickets to fans because the racing sucks ass, you've got to try something new.
Right, but I think, like you said, I think that, yes, the racing's been okay, but at the same time, the general closeness of the racing at the quote-unquote driver's tracks hasn't always been like a complete thriller every time. You look at Darlington races, they're almost always strung out, yet there's no one seems to fault Darlington or no one seems to stop going to Darlington for that reason. So I think I understand the mentality, but at the same time, you have to understand when a change isn't going to be a good change at the same time. So I think it's a tough thing to kind of balance, and it's a tough thing to do. But at the same time, maybe I would have been more willing to do this to Kentucky than I would have wanted to do this to Chicagoland or Atlanta, or like a good mile and a half. So I think it's tough for me to be on a particular side. I understand the mentality, but at the same time, it's just, sometimes it's not going to work.
I think it's just like a driver's favorite, like you were saying, like it's just one of the driver's favorite tracks. And I think, like, rather than like what you were saying, like in Kentucky or Chicagoland or something, just the fact that it's Atlanta, it's like a nostalgic track for them. It's like a historic track. There's a lot of history there. I think the repave would have been fine, but I think it's just the reconfiguration thing that kind of has people scratching their heads on.
So we had your dad on last week, and we talked about this news even before it broke. And I was fairly on board with it. I'm still on board with the repave and the higher banking. I do like how they added that apron transition into 24 degrees instead of just flat bank. I do like that. The only thing that I'm kind of joke against would be the narrowing of the track.
Yes.
And that's really the only thing, is because I feel like you're taking away a couple lanes of racing. I kind of understand why they did it. But it's cheaper to keep the walls in place and to throw new asphalt down and, do all that stuff. When you get into changing the banking, obviously you got to take the walls out and you got to re-angle them and shit like that. So, when you do one, might as well do the other. That's really the only thing I have a problem with. The higher banking, I understand. Understand new car, higher banking, new configuration. Let's keep an open mind here, because Texas and Kentucky failed, look at when they did their repaves. They did it right kind of in the middle of the earlier Gen 6. And then we just kind of saw the package develop from there into this shit we have now. But I think that, I don't know, I still have an open mind for the next gen car in terms of the racing quality. And then adding on this configuration, it'll definitely be interesting the first couple. It's going to take at least 2 or 3 races for us to really kind of get a judge on it. And then especially once the asphalt wears out, I think we'll get pretty damn good racing out of it. But the narrowing of the track, I'm still kind of questioning.
Yeah, that's my big thing too.
Yeah, I think Kyle Busch kind of knocked it out of the park in his one interview, saying like we're kind of going opposite of what they're trying to do, because like with all the PJ1 at every single track now, it seems like, and then Texas, when you have widening the track or whatever to try to create more racing, like why make it smaller and go against what we've been trying to do with trying to create more lanes of racing? That's kind of the question mark that I see, and I can agree with Kyle Busch and see his point on that situation.
Right, and I think Hamlin said something too, where he said that it's almost like a juxtaposition to what they're trying to do. He said that Atlanta wants the track to age quickly, yet at the same time they want pack racing. Those two things don't go together. And if you want age surface, you probably won't get pack racing. And if you want pack racing, you probably want a smooth surface. And I think that they seem to not know what they want. And if they're going to make a track for pack racing, then I guess I don't understand the idea of narrowing it because it just gives them less lanes to move around in.
Okay.
You know, if it's as wide as Daytona and they can barely fit 3 wide at Daytona, then I don't see how you're going to make a move at Atlanta.
I see.
Okay, so here's the thing. There's a couple points that you guys are making. All right. First of all, I love Atlanta. So I got Dakota in the chat over here saying some shit. Got to be a racing fan. I appreciate Atlanta. I love Atlanta. The drivers love Atlanta. It needed a repave. When you move the banking higher without pushing the embankment up, without just taking the walls down and redoing everything, you have to narrow the track. It is going to be 40 feet wide. Like you said, Daytona is 40 feet wide, but it squeezes in 3 people. Okay, well, we've got 4 wide going into 1 and 2 this weekend. We'll have 3 wide going into 1 and 2 elsewhere. Like Colton said, we'll have a 24-degree banking under the apron. So people will probably try to use that, trying to pass people on that apron going into 1 and 3. That's going to be fun. When you say Denny Hamlin's quote, it pisses me off to no return because Denny Hamlin is someone that I respect utterly. I love him. He has been my favorite since 2006. He is now a car owner. I love that team. I want him to support everything that he does and everything that he says. But when he says an abrasive surface doesn't lead to good pack racing, I want to punch him in the fucking throat. Did you not see any plate race at Daytona or Talladega before they got repaved?
But
they were fair, and there was passing, and there were good races.
Right. But to be fair, I don't know if I would consider those a pack race for more than a short run because you saw races like the Busch Series race there in the late 2000s. You know, you'd have guys literally gap the field. You know, it was a half pack race, but it wasn't really a pack race for the entire distance, if you will. Okay,
but we don't need pack racing for the entire deal. It's not going to work on a mile and a half.
Right.
So I think what they're doing is they're making the all-star race that we saw with the hood scoops and all that stuff come out. I think they're going to make that available for a first part of the run, but then we'll have comers and goers at the end of the run. I think that this is going to be a homogulation of a lot of different types of racing because it's going to be a new car, because the tires are going to be smaller. They're going to have to be a little bit harder because of banking and speeds. But I think it's going to wind up racing like a 70s or 80s Michigan Texas World Speedway type race. And we're going to not see as much pack racing, but we might see 4 or 5 cars in a line go out, and they're going to be passing constantly. And I think that I think it's going to be that way. My just analysis of past races, I hope it's going to be that way. I think it's going to be that way. And I think we're going to come out of this with a more entertaining racetrack than we have now. It's not going to be the same type of racing. It's not going to be as good of racing from a perspective like all of ours because we love old school driver's track. But it's going to be more entertaining. And I think more fans will appreciate it if we do get that super speedway style racing that we had pre-race or restrictor plates.
My only thing is that my concern is, are they going to have to lift midway into a run? Because my fear is that if they're already with a bigger spoiler, they're already flat out for most of the run in Michigan with a little bit of lifting here and there. And that's, I would assume, don't call me out on how steep Michigan's making is, but I would assume it's probably less than what Atlanta is now.
I think it's 20.
20? Just 20?
I think it's
20.
So
I'd imagine if the next gen car they have,
Jared's
they did
look it up for us
on that car. And if they run a big spoiler, they're probably not going to lift at all. And my fear is that how are you going to make a move? How are you going to come from 5 seconds back to get somebody if he's running wide open too? If you're both running wide open, there's really less of an opportunity to do that. And even with the older Daytona, you saw guys have to lift. So my hope is that
18 degrees is the banking.
18. Wow, it's not even as big as I thought. All right, so Nathan, to your point, this is where my disconnect with the fans comes in. You guys are going so hard on this reconfiguration, but you're yelling at the wrong person. In my opinion, if this was during the Gen 4 era, we would have seen some really badass racing because they would have had to lift in the middle of a corner because they had so much horsepower to downforce ratio. Now, if you look at the Gen 4 cars, they had 650 horsepower. They did not have 850 horsepower. If you look at that, we didn't get 850 horsepower to the latter years of the COT and the beginning of the Gen 6 eras. So we could see great racing if we have a similar downforce package with the 670 horsepower that they're going to next year. If they put a plate on this racetrack, if they go 450 horsepower, put the Speedway package on it, it's going to be a shit race. And I will take back everything that I'm saying in this podcast. But if they put that 670 package on there, they put a small spoiler with the splitter being raised in the center, it should produce pretty good racing and some passing. And if they do get it abrasive as it is now, we will definitely see them lifting in the corners. I don't have a problem with this. It's something new. I want to see it happen before I make any judgment of it. But I feel like bigger is better.
My only thing is that, yeah, I understand you're saying that if it was the Gen 4, but the problem is it almost seems like it was tailor-made for the type of racing that we criticize every week. Like, we don't like 550 racing, and it seems like they're trying to build a track that caters to that type of racing, and that's my biggest fear. You know, it depends on what they run there, but I question their intentions for creating the racetrack, and my intention or my interpretation of their intention makes me think, hey, they just want pack racing. That's all it.
If they put the regular, go ahead.
No downforce, 1,000 horsepower. Thank you, Dakota.
Yeah, pretty much. That's exactly what I'd go for.
So if we put a lower downforce package with the 670 that they're shooting for next year, we have no problem. The problem that we need to do is we need to tell NASCAR to stop with this bullshit and not bring a package that we would bring to Talladega or Daytona into this racetrack next season. That is going to make this race some of the most badass racing we see all year if they get the surface as abrasive as they want to with this new technology. I'm done on my rant. If there's anything else that you guys have to say about this reconfiguration, go ahead, and then if not, I'll go ahead and move on.
I mean, the package is the root of the problem here. This wouldn't be an issue at all, narrowing the track, banking, anything, if we still had way too many horses under the hood and not near enough grip on the rear wheels. We'd still see guys slip and slide around. I think no matter what track we go to, we'd still see good finishes every once in a while, probably pretty regularly. The package is the big thing. Get rid of that giant-ass spoiler on the back.
Yeah, I think that's exactly your point, and that's my fear is that I really hope that they didn't design this track with a big spoiler in mind, because I think that would really do it some damage.
Yeah, I'm also going to point out the simulation video thing or whatever that Atlanta put there. I think it's super hard to try to hype people up, like, hey, you're going to see a new Atlanta or whatever, and then throw iRacing simulation on there when no one even knows how that car would even drive on that track. Nope. So how are you going to make a simulation out of who knows? We could have one of those. You remember that Xfinity race at Michigan a couple of years ago, where it was just single file most of the time, and you couldn't pass in the turns because if you tried to drop down, you're just going to get freight trained by everyone.
Yeah. And I got one more here. I don't know if you can see this here. Dakota posted. Why don't we ask Goodyear what the deal is? I know I talked about this in our group chat with Dakota. Goodyear needs to be a part of this conversation here. Why the hell are they bringing bricks that last for goddamn ever to the track every single weekend? Why can't they give us something that wears out? Can't we give us something that as soon as you race, X amount of miles on it or drive it X amount of hard that, we could see blowouts. All week we've heard that, danger is a part of racing. Danger is part of the appeal. Flat tires would be a pretty good damn appeal. We'd see tires wear out at damn near everywhere you go, not just the abrasive surfaces. I think that needs to be a part of the conversation too. Goodyear's bringing too good of tires to these tracks. Even in F1, absolutely. Pirelli has said that they can make tires that last the whole race. They can make tires that last damn near the whole weekend.
That's exactly why I don't like. That's one of the things that kind of gets to me too, is that Pirelli doesn't really know what the F1 fans want, because it seems like their tires, they last way too long as is, yet at the same time they have to be babied too much. It seems like their tires almost oppose one another. It's like if you want to push every lap of a stint, you can't do that with Pirelli like you could with a Bridgestone or a Michelin.
Yeah. Well,
And
let's bring it back to Goodyear.
right,
Tony
and I think
Stewart said
that's
it
the
best.
problem. I know.
He said he exited out of Formula One, IndyCar. I don't know. I guess he said IMSA and some other stuff, but they're not accepted anywhere because they're not good tires. They're shit tires. Put Michelin's on them. Put General Tires on them. General Tire makes a good tire for the ARCA series, so they know what they're doing.
Are they not like owned by Goodyear though?
I think they are.
They might be. I'm not sure, but their tires
I
are
would say
better.
the best tire right now in racing is probably the Firestone for IndyCar because people talk about oval racing and they say blowouts are a natural part of oval racing, and I will give them that the cars that they run for are much lighter, but you've never seen a Firestone tire blow out on a high-speed oval for IndyCar, and it's crazy that they're a good racing tire, and number two, they're actually something that the drivers can trust. Say, hey, we actually know how this tire is going to react.
You can bring the super good tires that aren't going to blow out at the tracks that it matters. The Michigans, the Indianapolises, the Poconos, things like that, where we're running super, super hard. But at Martinsville, bring a super soft tire. At Bristol, bring a super. I mean, I want to be able to bend this thing with my fingers when it's full of air. Bring something that's really going to wear out and that's really going to see these drivers on the edge every lap.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that there are some tracks where you can't really have a soft tire, to get disastrous like Indy last year. I think there are tracks, but like you said, I think road courses are another fun one where you can have soft tires, and it's definitely short tracks because you see the improvement it makes. And I do hope that they look at this and like, hey, maybe we need to change up the compound we bring to this track, or maybe we don't need to bring the brakes everywhere.
With the new car, we're going to have really thin tires, and I think the profile of the tire is going to have to be completely different. So I don't trust Goodyear at all with that. I would rather see someone like a Michelin come in because they've had, these GT cars that have ridden around Daytona and stuff, albeit at lower speeds because they're gaining speed and then losing speed coming in and out of the bus stop and stuff like that. But I would want someone who's dealt with lower profile tires before that hasn't shit the bed in every other series they've been in. And I hate that Goodyear got another contract extension, but I've been saying that since I was like 10 years old. I've just never really liked Goodyear. So I don't know. Firestone may be the way to go. Maybe Hoosier. I know there was some bad things about Hoosier way back when in the 90s when we had the tire wars, but I feel like they've got good tires on short tracks now. They could probably do what they need to do, get their scientists on it. Whatever.
Every super late model division in the country uses Hoosiers.
Right. Absolutely. So that might be.
That's what I would go with.
So.
Yep.
All right. So moving on, the tweet that broke the sport. Maybe we don't know yet. So.
Oh man.
This could be something really, really stringent over the next couple of weeks. We don't know exactly where we're going, but this rabbit hole that we're about to get down into all started from a little old 19-year-old college kid from Florida named Nathan Ball. He tweets out that Tony Stewart talking about the direction of NASCAR is headed in, judging by how drivers reacted to the Atlanta repave, this is still very, very relevant. So, as I've said before, I think this tweet itself doesn't really have anything to do with Atlanta. I think Atlanta was the tipping of the iceberg. And what Steve Swift said was the tipping of the iceberg. The fans want something. The drivers don't really want the same things the fans want, so they don't need to be consulted. So, as we get into this, Tony basically says there's guys up there that's never done anything with a race car, never even sat in one, much less raced one, trying to tell us what we want as fans and or race car drivers, and not really caring what the race car drivers say. So this tweet pretty much broke the sport. So let's get into it. Nathan, what's the disconnect between NASCAR and the race car drivers right now?
I would, judging by what everyone said last week, is probably at an all-time high. I don't think I've seen that many drivers interact with one tweet in particular for a long time. It's very strange for drivers to jump on one fan's tweet like they did with mine. So clearly it must have struck a chord, and clearly they're agreeing with it. And, who knows how many of the guys saw the tweet and didn't interact with it, because I'm sure there were a lot of views with the tweet and a lot of people that were not on Twitter even watching the video. So I think there's almost something to it that it kind of hints at underlying problems that we're not seeing, because if if a group of drivers is going to agree with some random kid over their own leadership, then there's got to be some stuff behind closed doors that we don't know about. There's got to be some stuff that are major red flags to us, at least, that kind of indicate that, hey, we don't have as good leaders as we think we do. I don't think that there's a lot of things that are good right now with it. So it's just with the way everything played out this week, it seems like it kind of blew up because there were other things going on this week. There were mixed reports about the new car having some sort of issues with the crash test and the Atlanta repave and what Steve Swift said. I think it all kind of just snowballed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. You sent us a list of all the drivers that you had kept track of. Granted, this was days ago.
Who knows how many there are more now.
Denny Hamlin, Noah Gragson, Tommy Joe Martins, Austin Hill, Bob Levine, Matt Weaver, just to name a few. Even BFM, Black Flags Matter. Fuck that guy. You're talking about. I'm sure Denny Hamlin was in that meeting that Tony's talking about. I'm sure there was Kyle Busch, Kurt Busch. Kevin Harvick. There's a ton of guys that were outspoken this weekend that interacted with that tweet, and they go, "Oh yeah, I remember that." And it's just as prevalent today as it was. Also, this thing opened up the whole can of worms about the safety. It wasn't until Bob Levine and Steve Meal came out and said, "Hey, we heard these kind of rumors." And that's what sparked the Reddit. That's what sparked the talking to the drivers about it, and that's what sparked this whole thing this weekend. So I think it's crazy. I can't remember a single time within at least the last 5 years where one single tweet has spilled over as much as this has, just because, you didn't even post anything controversial. You just posted something that was already on YouTube from Coffee with Kyle, however many years ago it was. I don't know, a few years ago at least. You posted an existing clip and just resurfaced it. And it was crazy to see that thing blow up. It's just south of 2,000 likes right now, which is insane. Just for a little snip of a video. A 30-second clip. But it makes you wonder what the drivers are thinking if they're, even guys like Tommy Joe Martins are agreeing with us and interacting with that tweet and saying, yeah, okay, I kind of see it. I haven't seen drivers ever been this outspoken about something. Since 2000, when we had the big safety war going on with guys like Jeff Burton, Dale Earnhardt coming out and saying that there's a problem here. And that's kind of what we're seeing now. This reminds me, I've said it all week on Twitter, the conversations that are being had right now remind me a hell of a lot of 2000, when drivers were kind of being outspoken and NASCAR was saying, deal with it. It's going to be interesting moving forward. Great job posting that, dude.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I'm not going to be the one responsible for it. I'm just like, hey, if this thing's got problems, it's not my problem. I just posted the video. And, most forms of racing, if you post an audio clip from 3 years ago, it's probably not going to do what it did here. So it's almost like a case of say, hey, don't blame the person tweeted. Just thought it was something cool, and then everything just blew over.
Yeah, it's just been crazy seeing how much how many drivers have actually seen and interacted. Like we were saying, that's probably getting passed around in all the drivers group chat and stuff. Like, hey, this kid's onto something. I think they know a little bit of something, because especially if they like it or whatever, they're obviously probably going to bring it up in maybe the drivers team meetings or something. Be like, hey, what did you think about this person's tweet or this video that he just resurfaced right now? So it's pretty cool to see that, but it's also just shows that this whole weekend, like Jeff Gluck said in his tweet, I haven't heard this many drivers be as outspoken as they are since as long as I can even remember. So that's an interesting topic, and I really do think that really kind of sparked something, especially if Matt Weaver retweeted it. So that's a big name. That's a big name in the journalism community. So if he's going to retweet and say something about it, I think that's really going to start turning some heads. Be like, all right, this is an issue right now,
Yeah, I agree completely. If you guys listen to this week's DBC, Brett Griffin mentions that in Michigan a few years ago they had a drivers-only meeting where Tony Stewart walked out and he said, I'm not dealing with this because all they're telling me is to not speak out about NASCAR. And I feel like this is a really big case of drivers saying, fuck it, we're going to do what we want.
Yeah, so
I'll also add real quick too.
Mute him, Alex. Mute him.
I'm not going to mute anybody. I'll say what I have to say.
I'll just be quick with this. I was just gonna say, you noticed how it's all the older veteran type of guys that are getting more attention in this situation compared to guys you don't really, you didn't hear anything like Cole Custer or your Tyler Reddick or whatever. Those guys didn't really say a lot of things that were as big as like what Harvick and Hamlin and those guys were saying, or and you have like Chase Elliott who's still kind of young, who's just kind of being like hush hush about this situation, you know. So it's just interesting how I think the older guys get it, and I think they've just been held back so long that I think now this was like the perfect weekend just to absolutely just blow it out of the waters.
So Colton, why I didn't mute him or anyone else who's talking over me is just because of what he just said. He reminded me of something that was said about the repave, and that was Chase Elliott said, "It doesn't matter. I've raced here. I've wanted to win here. I'll win here on the new surface. The ground's still the same. It doesn't matter what they do. It's not up to me. It's not my decision. I'm a driver. I'm going to drive. That's my job. Someone else's job to do all the layout changes and all the logistics of that." So when it comes to something like this, on kind of a different point, when Nathan and I came together, I had been wanting to do this since 2015. I wanted a voice for the fans. I wanted to show the sport what we wanted from our own perspectives, right? Because we don't have anywhere to say what we're going to say. We've got, the four of us, some of that coming where more fans will be involved than just us four in the future. You guys will have to stay tuned for that. But for right now, Nathan has done exactly what I wanted to do with this concept of fan fuel. And that is get the word out from a fan to shake something up. And Nathan, you did it at like 2 or 3 in the morning that night, and you did it with a baseless, really tweet that really didn't mean anything, but it shook NASCAR, right? It got those guys whose blood have been boiling for the past 4 or 5 years because they haven't been heard, and just popped the top off of the tea kettle of their, boiling blood. And that's all that I could say is that I appreciate that, because now we're having conversations that we wouldn't have had 3 weeks ago. We're having conversations where I'm pissed off because you guys don't like the reconfigure of Atlanta, but we're also having a really in-depth review of why is the sport taking their star players and not giving two rat's asses about them? And also, why do they think we don't think their opinions matter as fans? Because that's really what the borderline, I guess, reason for your tweet blowing up comes out to. It's that we aren't being listened to, and they think that just because they're the gods of the sport, that for some reason we'd rather listen to them than the drivers who we idolize each week. I don't know. I appreciate you doing this. It got yourself blown up. It helped us gain a little bit of traction. And it's what I called you out for, because at the beginning of this, you didn't want to come on to the show. I basically had to beg you, and now you've gone and done something that, like, just I'm proud of the whole situation right now, but because you've basically just changed the sport, probably for the better, hopefully for the better, for the rest of whatever. Yep. So with that being said, these drivers are pissed off a little bit about not being told whether or not these cars that they're going to get into are safe. So I know Colton alluded to the 2000 season and similar stuff happening then. Nathan, you're a med student. Where does this safety kind of revolve for the sport with you?
I think the biggest thing is transparency, like you said. There was an article posted, I think, last night with Matt Weaver talking about how they had a couple drivers come on there and talk about how they had met with people in the sport and they didn't actually get any answers as to how safe the car was. And I know Kurt Busch was saying, like, hey, this is a little bit weird that I met with this guy and they didn't even tell me whether it was good or bad. They just told me it was inconclusive. So I think that's the biggest thing for me. I think that another thing that people don't really realize is that when it comes to safety and all these kind of things, it's kind of ever changing. And I think the fact that it's rumored to have taken a step back is a confusing part for me, because at least 9 times out of 10, they normally don't take a step back. It almost reminds me of when IndyCar made their little split in the late 90s. And I think the new IRL cars were kind of dangerous. They were, I wouldn't say they were death traps, but they were certainly a lot more dangerous than they should have been. It almost reminds me of that, as to the sport sort of going backwards rather than forwards. And I think another problem that you're going to create with that is, again, the transparency. Like, if you're a sanctioning body and your driver's like, hey, I want to know how safe this car is. If you're telling them, hey, well, you're going to find out when you strap into Daytona, that's not really a comforting thing.
No.
It's like if you're going skydiving and they're like, we don't know if this parachute works or not, but you're gonna find out when you pull the cord. It's just there's some stuff you just can't do, and in this scenario, you have to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. I know a lot of younger fans, Nate, Jared, probably even to an extent, don't remember 2000. I wasn't very old at that time, but I remember what was going on. I remember Adam Petty dying. I remember Kenny Irwin dying. I remember it being a pretty big deal. And I even told you guys in the group chat, like, I think my parents stopped letting me watch races for a couple weeks just because my dad did it at the time, and he was a super big racer going for a championship. And for a little kid to go see someone die on TV and then watch my dad go do that same shit 4 days later, 5 days later, that could have been pretty traumatizing. And to Nate's point, I don't feel like they're just throwing safety out the window, but I think it's the lack of communication. We all know that NASCAR loves to brag on themselves and pat themselves on the back. If this was a super safe car and they knew they had the data to prove it, we'd have seen it by now. If they knew that it was even comparable to the Gen 6, and we could say, and they could say, hey, we got good crashes here. We can match them up. We can compare them. It's good. They would have came out and said it, at least to the drivers. And that's the biggest worry that I have is the drivers have these concerns, whereas in the past, fans have had concerns, and the drivers are super quick to hush it down and say, no, you guys are wrong. You guys are wrong here. But the fact that we saw Chase Briscoe go on Reddit and reply to a comment of, hey, would this test have killed the dummy from what you've heard? And he says, yeah. That's exactly what it would have done. That's pretty concerning. The drivers haven't even been filled in this loop. It raises a lot of flags that NASCAR probably has some questions that they're asking themselves, not just to the drivers. And I mean, we'll probably get into it here in a little bit, but the Michael McDowell of racing isn't supposed to be safe. We don't need to take a step backward. Let's keep it the same. Let's improve one or the other. We don't need to go backwards. We don't need to see more guys dying. That would kill the momentum of the sport. As much as new fans would tune in, you'd see a lot of these older guys going, we haven't had a death in 20 years. Why in the end did someone get killed over this seemingly, this wreck that we've seen dozens of guys survive in the last 15 years? Whereas new fans would say, hey, they haven't had a death in 20 years. Here's another one, yada, yada, yada. For a lot of these older fans that have been around quite a while, it really turns me off that these rumors are even happening.
I think, like I said,
disappointing.
I think the toughest thing is that it probably wasn't intended to be less safe than the other car. I don't think they intended it for it to be like this. I'm pretty sure it's just a combination of, either, hey, even the best engineers make mistakes every now and then, and there's probably a case of that. It's not the mistake that bothers me. It's how they handle the mistake with the fact that they're not willing to admit it. That's the biggest thing for me because no person is going to be infallible in any particular field. And I think science is always one of those fields where there's room for mistakes. And when those mistakes happen, they're pretty bad usually. And I don't fault them for that, but they've had a long time to fix it. And I think it stems from almost a little combination of multiple areas. I think part of it is there's a worldwide part supply issue right now that multiple drivers have hinted at because of COVID. There's a money issue because of COVID. And then you've got manufacturers that have never had any experience with NASCAR before trying to build a stock car when all they've built before are open wheel cars. So they don't really know how to do this. So when you give an inexperienced manufacturer a chance to make a race car like that, there's going to be all sorts of kinks that need to be ironed out. And like I said before, if you admit you have a mistake, then that's no big deal. Just work on it. You can fix it. But if you know you've made a mistake and you refuse to admit it, especially when said mistakes got consequences, that's where all the problems lie. Because if you're not going to be able to admit you made a mistake, then what are you going to do if somebody actually did die?
Right. Exactly.
You'd rather want to have the mistake now rather than roll up into Daytona next year and someone get killed. That's just going to make NASCAR itself look like an absolute joke. Like, wow, they just rolled out this new car that killed someone. Like, what a great sport. That would not be a good week, not a good start to speed weeks, and that would not be good for NASCAR in general, starting off the next gen of racing like that.
Yeah, and I think
and with that, you got to say, when we look at crashes at Daytona specifically, if we're going to go into Daytona, they weren't going to race the next gen car at Daytona this year. They were going to start it off in the second race, right? So, what do we see at Daytona? You see the big ones. You see these really massive wrecks, especially the two that I thought I saw someone die, and that was Austin Dillon's crash, and then, of course, Ryan Newman's crash in 2020. If we have a moment like that, just like Jared just said, if we have a moment like that at Daytona, not only are we going to be scared that we saw someone die, but with the little information that we have, we might actually see someone die. And like he said, you can't have that going into the next generation of a car. I guess you've heard Colton and Nathan both say this. You can't go backwards. If you're going to have a new iteration of something, that has to at least match the last one. And in this safety that we're talking about now, you definitely can't go backwards because you've got a public eye on everything. These guys are not only representing themselves and their families and stuff, but they're representing companies and stuff like that. So, I mean, you've got a bunch of eyes on everything all the time, and you're representing stuff. You can't let one of these people die. And it's not, I mean, it's not just because there's money involved, but, I mean, there is. But you and I and everyone watching and listening, you know, once this goes on the streaming platforms, they've all got their favorite drivers. I don't think they want to watch somebody like Ryan Newman die who they might hate their guts. You know, human life is just so precious, and we've only got 40 of these guys that can do this stuff. Why would we endanger them? And why would we let them think that they could go, you know, just get hurt in a wreck that should have been fine, you know, last year with the Gen 6 car?
Yeah, my thing is that I think, like you said, one of the biggest things with the science field is that if you want any progress, you have to admit when you've made a mistake. And just the way they've handled it is kind of disturbing, you know, saying, hey, we got this, don't worry, that never happened, be quiet, you know. That's a huge red flag for me. And I think something that they mentioned or the G-force numbers from the crashes. And I think obviously those are not really as public as other series would put them out there. They mentioned that Byron's wreck off of turn 2 into the inside wall at Fontana last year had similar numbers to the tire failures at the Brickyard last year, which were probably, in all honesty, some of the hardest hits of the entire season last year. So if you take a crash, like say the one that broke Kyle Busch's legs 6 years ago, you know, who knows if they would have walked out of that, because the biggest thing with high G-force hits like that injure people, it's energy dissipation. And their main concern with the car is that it doesn't dissipate the energy that needs to happen to make sure that people walk out of these wrecks. And if all the energy goes to the driver, it's not a good thing, obviously, because it's only going to create more problems. So, you know, if you run into a wall head on or whatever, and none of the energy is actually going where it needs to go, and it's all going to the driver, then you're going to have a lot more problems. Because I think that most injuries these days, they can be preventable, but stuff like concussions, you're probably, I don't see a way that you're ever going to stop those from happening. So I don't think increasing the likelihood of those happening is going to help anything.
Yeah, and you brought up the Kyle Busch crash. He got injured, and he even came out in an interview with Grant Bessinger. If y'all have seen that, he comes out and he says, when I was sliding towards the inside wall, I knew that there wasn't grass. I knew I was going to hit hard. And so he said, I braced up, and I was so worried about bracing up and keeping my hands tight that I forgot to bring my feet off the pedals. And that's what broke his leg, is because he was too tensed up in his foot. And then when that wheel came back, there wasn't any room for his leg to go, broke his foot.
Right. And that's why they've had these new
several. Yeah.
Right. They've had like new, almost, I wouldn't call them intrusion panels like IndyCar, but they've done something to the foot area of the car. I remember probably 4 years ago that they wrote an article about this, to where they wanted to prevent parts of the car being pushed back into where the pedals are to cause leg injuries and stuff, because they had a scare with Danica Patrick. They said if she wasn't, you know, under 5'5", then she would have had broken legs or whatever, you know.
Yeah. So, and it's that exact same thing. When you bring up the G-forces that we've seen, even it's unofficial, but NASCAR's come out and said a lot of the people who were at the test, a lot of the people who were in the industry came out and said those G-forces were kind of scary for the impact it was. It makes me think we're looking at least a 40-mile-an-hour difference between the Eric Jones and the Denny Hamlin blowouts to Byron's impact into the wall. If they were that alarming, I think if we would have seen a 10, 20-mile-an-hour difference between the impacts, it wouldn't have been quite as scary. But I mean, you got to think of how wide that Fontana track is and how much time he had to scrub off speed. I mean, he's probably going on asphalt and he's sliding, he's scrubbing tires, locking the brakes down. For him to hit that hard into the inside wall, that's pretty scary. That's a wreck that we're going to see 3 or 4 times in a year. I think of Ryan Preece's wreck at Kansas last year. What's it looking like in that next gen if it is as rigid as the rumors are saying?
Yeah, my bet is
talking out. Was the car rolling over? Is he alive? And that's kind of where the fans are going.
Right. And my thing with energy dissipation is how the car hits too. You don't know because there's no video of the crash. Right. What does it look like? If it looks like the Ryan Preece wreck, it's scarier because the Preece wreck, as bad as it looked, that went about as good as it could have gone for a type of crash like that. Because if he hits with the left front corner of his car and not this way, the car doesn't spin around. It doesn't dissipate the energy. It just goes, you come to a dead stop. And that were to happen, say Byron's crash was 40 miles an hour quicker, it'd probably have worse consequences. You look at Kyle Busch's crash, he hit it probably the worst angle you could possibly hit at in terms of you hit it at an angle to where all the energy goes to the driver and it doesn't spin around. He was going 90 miles an hour when that happened, which is pretty slow for a crash these days. And it was still a 90G hit. Like, what would 90 miles an hour do in the next-gen car?
Yeah, and my biggest question is one of my favorite tracks, Jared, your home track of Pocono. You were at the races when both Bubba Wallace and Jimmy Johnson hit the turn 1 walls, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask, from your perspective, being at the track, what was that sound like, and what did you guys feel as a crowd during that wreck? Because whatever you felt, it's going to be 2 to 3 times that if we have a similar crash at Pocono.
Well, considering they both happened like turn 1, you definitely heard it because it was such that that's the fastest straightaway, and you're going right into that wall. Like that's you could hear that from where I was sitting, and then like it's just that awkward like eerie silence. Like, oh, is he going to get out or whatever? Because you've seen at Pocono, there's been some gnarly wrecks there before. Like you got like the Dale Jr. Steve Park one, you got Elliott Sadler trying to struggle. Like, he got like lost his whole engine out of one of the hits that he had. And there's just always been so many wrecks there. It's like, oh, are they going to make? Are they all right? But just the fact that turn 1, like you could definitely hear that, like the impact on that, the crash from what I remember.
Yeah, so, okay, with as rigid as this car is and what we've seen, IndyCar doesn't race there anymore. That track was designed for IndyCar. I don't know if you went to the Indy races for any of those, but with those races having such hard impacts and different things happening, do you think at your home track of Pocono that the next-gen car is even going to be viable if we have this sort of rigidity? Because it's probably the toughest track on the schedule as far as 2 cars.
Well, this is another thing where it'll really depend on which package that they bring to that track, because they ran the 550 package for the races that are at this year, and I think they ran that last year, obviously. And it's just, I think it's a lot easier for the drivers now because they don't really have to brake or anything. Like you saw Kyle Busch, he didn't even have to shift the entire last stage of the race. So if they're running a higher horsepower package and it's like old school Pocono where you're shifting so like more often than not, then you might have that risk for like hitting the wall or something, or taking that turn way too fast. Whereas with the package we have now, they just have to lift a little bit and just cruise into the corner and get a draft, and you're good to go. Because we haven't really seen any vicious crashes there the last 2 years with the package that we've ran, or the last 3 years there. I can't really remember any like severe crashes there prior to the 550, 750 package split.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's just difficult because, if the car itself is rigid, then there's going to be hits that normally aren't a concern that now become a concern. And normally, at least from what the experts would tell you, is that it's always the crashes that don't look spectacular that are the ones that are the worst on the driver. If you go back to 2008 Las Vegas, everyone knows the hit Jeff Gordon had to the inside wall. But a lot of people don't know is there was Tony Stewart in the same race. He blew a right front and hit the turn 3 wall, which was actually a safer barrier. And the officials said that was almost an equal blow to the outside wall with a safer barrier as it was to Gordon's crash without one. So I get kind of confused as to wonder what it would do to one of these cars if you hit it the same way, where you don't have any energy that gets dissipated. You just hit a wall and that's it.
Yeah, and another concern that comes up with me is the teams haven't gotten these chassis yet. They're supposed to go to Bristol to do a tire test next month, was what Kevin Harvick said. They can't get chassis. So that definitely indicates me that NASCAR is still working on something, whether there's a big red flag issue like we were talking about, or it's just a little minute thing. We don't know those kind of details. But the way NASCAR is treating this of the, hey, we got it, shut up kind of thing. That Steve Miller did, I think it was Steve Miller, whatever his name is, did in the interview with SiriusXM. He kind of just said, oh, they're all fake, yada, yada, yada. We'll give you the data when we can get to it, yada, yada, yada. That doesn't really settle any nerves, especially if I'm a driver. Especially if I'm a driver and I'm sitting there and I know I'm going to have to strap into one of these things next year. That doesn't calm me at all. And especially if I'm going to have to do a tire test here in 3-4 weeks at Bristol, that doesn't calm me at all. I could be going 130 miles an hour into the corner, and you're telling me if this tire fails, because it's a test, and I hit that wall that I'm looking at a super, super hard impact, I'm really nervous. And again, teams are building Daytona cars by now usually. They're starting to work on their Daytona 500 chassis. They're kind of building it ground up and seeing what they can do. They haven't even got a chassis yet, and that's really alarming to me.
Yeah, so let's roll into safety and stuff, and then I'm gonna add a little bit there. Some of the drivers have come out and had comments where they are concerned, but some of them have also said stuff where they weren't concerned. So if I look at some of these comments, as far as the ones that aren't concerned, some that Nathan had listed were, I'll still race regardless of if it's safe or not. That's from Chase Elliott. Racing is dangerous. That's just the way it's always been, Christopher Bell. And racing isn't supposed to be completely safe, Michael McDowell. Now, let's not take these too far out of context, but when it comes to this, basically, racing is inherently dangerous. We've said before on this show that, we shouldn't take a step back. But when it comes to this kind of different side of driver perspectives, where these certain drivers are kind of pushing it off as, oh, well, being a race car driver, there's inherent danger. I mean, how do we feel as fans knowing that we don't want them to get hurt?
I before I say anything, I want to clarify that, yes, I do in fact care about the safety. I've had, that Jordan Fixin guy or whatever his name is on Twitter tell me that I don't care about the safety of the sport because I said that I just simply stated that it's hard to stop physics from happening. That's all I said. And, a lot of people don't realize that I'm actually part of a board, like a council thing, to where you can sign up to be a student member of an International Council of Motorsport Sciences, which has a lot of cool studies and a lot of people that are involved in the design of the safety mechanisms that are on this board. And you get to listen to Zoom conferences and meetings with them and stuff like that, it's really cool to listen to. But at the same time, I think people have to realize with the safety part that, yes, there's always going to be some sort of risk with racing. That's just kind of the impreventable part of this sport. But at the same time, I do think they're always going to try and get better. There's no way around that. They're going to try and get better. Doesn't mean they can, but at least they're making attempts to do so. But I think at the end of the day, whether there's 100% risk or a 0% risk or maybe even a 1% risk, there's still going to be some risk involved with it. So I think it's part of the fans' job to understand that the people involved are trying to do their best with safety. There's not, like I said, there's going to be kinks, but at the same time, that's why there's always usually a thing at some tickets, if you go to certain racetracks, says motorsport is inherently dangerous. That's just, it's something that you don't want to see, but at the same time, there's always going to be some risk. And I think the more they work towards trying to help the safety, the better it's going to be. But I just don't see, even as someone who wants to work in this field in the future, I would probably say that if there was no risk, then people like that, there wouldn't be people wanting to go into this line of work. Like there wouldn't be jobs for motorsport medicine.
So Jared, I do want to kind of ask you this because you're a fan of Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch had his legs broken, and then he came to win the championship in 2015. When you go into a racetrack and you visualize something that's happened to a driver of yours like that, and you've got other drivers on the grid saying, "Oh, it's dangerous. It doesn't really matter." When we're talking about taking a step back in safety, I mean, what do you feel as someone who's experienced like something like that's happened to their driver?
Oh, it would suck just because it's like, it's your favorite driver and everything, but it's also like they're no different than you and me, like there's always those risks of, crashing on the highway or something or whatever. Like that's
Right.
It's a risk, It's like that's the comment like that Michael McDowell made. It seems to me like, yeah, it's kind of like an obvious comment, but I feel like it's one of those comments just trying to like maybe stir the pot a little bit more for discussions or whatever, because I hate comparing it to other sports, but like that's like the same thing as like Patrick Mahomes saying like, well, we could get concussed at any, like football's a dangerous sport. We could get our heads knocked off if we get sacked the right way or something, It's like one of those, like every sport does have their dangers and everything. And that comment just kind of like made the point, like, yeah, it's dangerous, but I think everyone knew that, everyone signed up for that. And it's just a part of racing. It's a part of life, but
Right.
Yeah. So that's basically the point I'm trying to make with that topic.
Right. And I guess to your point, I agree. I've had drivers break their backs. I've had my favorite driver, puncture a lung in a race and walk out of there like nothing happened and still try to get in the race car the next week and actually have to get sat down by doctors to tell him, say, hey, you can't drive in this race with broken ribs and a potential punctured lung like that, But at the same time, I do agree, like as much as say people like me want to help in the future and work in safety and racing, we at the same time know that there's always going to be a certain amount of risk with it, because if there was no risk, there wouldn't be any doctors at a racetrack,
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack here. To the comments made of racing's always going to be dangerous, of course. Football's always going to be dangerous. Baseball's always going to be dangerous. Most sports are always going to be dangerous to a degree. Racing more so than others. Broken bones, torn ligaments, things like that you get from hard impacts, concussions even. I understand. It's going to happen. When you crash a car into a wall at 180, 190, 200 miles an hour, it's going to happen. There's almost no way to get around that. And physics have proved that, and scientists have proved that. And that's why we have doctors here, is not only for what could go wrong, but eventually will go wrong. What I don't like is the whole, well, racing's supposed to be dangerous, so let's just leave it as it is. I don't want to see deaths. I don't want to see guys getting paralyzed. I don't want to see any permanent or maiming injury happen in NASCAR again. And that's really what I'm getting at here. When you all see me argue on Twitter, granted, I'm a dickhead on Twitter. I'm emotionally I argue my absolute heart out because I've been through this. And I feel like a lot of the fans that I get on and I talk to are newer fans, and they don't understand it. And I'm just trying to be as passionate as possible. I'm a sprint car fan. I follow the World of Outlaws damn near every week, every race they go to. I at least try to keep up on the race. I remember when Jason Johnson died.
I remember that too, actually.
It bummed me out for weeks because he wasn't just like a back of the pack guy. He was like, he was almost like a front runner now. And if you can think of any guy who runs in the front consistently, Joey Logano maybe, he was kind of like that. He won a ton of races, and he flipped, hit a billboard, and was killed. I don't want to see drivers get killed.
And for me, I'd say Brian Clausen is the same.
Brian
Clausen was a
Clausen
guy that I was looking forward to going to IndyCar.
Yeah,
he never got that chance.
I was 40 miles away from that track when he died in Kansas. I was at a wedding, and I was actually debating leaving the wedding and going to that race, and I'm super glad I did. And it bummed me out. I took extra days off work because of that, because I was just so distraught over that. Racing deaths, they hit me hard, and I don't want to see one in NASCAR.
Right, and I would agree. Like I don't think I would necessarily quit racing if I was at a race and my favorite driver was killed. I don't think I would necessarily stop going to racing.
No.
But I think that at the same time, I don't really want to see it happen either. Like it's almost like a case of, say if I work in this field, 15 years down the line, it's almost like a better case of it's better to have and not need a doctor there than to need and not have one. You know, like it's almost like, hey, I hope that we don't have to get called into action today, type thing. Like,
yeah,
you don't
I hope
want
we don't have to use the ambulance. I hope we don't have to airlift someone out. Eric
Right,
Almirola was
want to
a
use that
super
kind of
scary
stuff.
one.
Right.
Almirola scared the piss out of me. When I saw that he was being life flighted out, I thought the worst, and it turns out it was just a broken back. All right, that'll happen.
Right.
But when I hear people talk about racing's always dangerous, we don't need to worry about it, that raises some concerns with me. And I hear people say, and Michael McDowell alluded to this, he said that's part of the appeal of the sport. Okay, well, if danger was a major factor into appeal, PBR would be the number one sport on television every week. It's not. You know, I mean, when you see someone get, or when you see a bad wreck, that's the danger appeal, right? And then you see the guy get out, and you keep racing. A lot of these people that are talking about it probably weren't at the track when something like that happens. When you see a death, when I would see someone get killed at a race, I don't want to watch that next race at that track, right? I can understand. I've heard fans say that they didn't want to watch the 2001 Pepsi 400. They didn't want to watch that first Talladega race after Dale died. I get it, right? It's different when you go through it. And I look at Twitter's reaction when Ryan Newman's wreck happened. All these fans that are saying, "Oh, it's dangerous. It's part of the sport," were the same ones that were up in the air and that were praying for him and that were doing all this and tweeting that. You got to scare. You don't want to have a promise here.
Right, and I think, something on that topic is I was actually, if you remember a crash in the ARCA race at Daytona in 2017, there was a driver named Justin Fontaine that actually did hit the wall head on in front of us.
Yep.
He ended up having the exact same injury that Almirola did, which was a compression fracture of his lower back. I don't want to say which vertebra it actually was, but it was almost a very similar injury. And I actually sat with his family when that happened. I guess like his brothers and his parents were actually in the row in front of us, and we saw that happen. And like some guy leaned over, was like, "Oh, hey, that's our son out there," And we were like, "Hey, is he okay?" And they're like, "Yeah, he's okay. He's just he has back pains or whatever," and they're gonna send him over to the hospital and get him X-rayed. It wasn't like a life or death thing, but when you see it, it's kind of interesting because it gives you a different perspective. At least from my side of the things, I've always kind of been an analytical person, so I've never really identified with the emotional side of things until then. But it is interesting to see that because, you don't want necessarily to go to a racetrack and say, hey, is my loved one actually going to survive? You don't want to have to know that. Right. You see, you look at the Indy 500 every year, they show the drivers' family members, or they used to back when ABC was a thing. Like you would see how nervous those people were watching the end of those races because they knew how dangerous it was. You don't necessarily want to have to do that because I think it's almost it would probably take the family aspect out of the sport if people started dying left and right because, like Colton said, they wouldn't want to take a kid to an event like that.
Right, exactly. And last point I'll make here is my girlfriend Cheyenne, love her to death. She's had a hard day today. But she's told me a couple times, like, hey, when we go to the races, the local track, I want to see someone flip. I've never seen that before. I think it'd be cool. And I tell her all the time, like, that's just because you've never seen someone flip, right? So these fans are like, oh, I kind of want to see a bad wreck. Dangerous part of the appeal. Like, well, that's because you haven't seen someone die. Like, that's because you haven't seen someone paralyzed. You haven't seen this. You haven't seen that. It's kind of one of those things that once you see it happen, you don't want to see it again. And I feel like a lot of the disconnect that we have with these younger drivers, I don't know how old some of these guys are, but they couldn't have been more than my age coming in. The Chase Elliott's, I know he's my age. Right. The Christopher Bell, I know he's only a couple years older. They probably really don't remember it. Granted, Christopher Bell deals with sprint cars and stuff like that, so he's been around it a lot more, and that's why his comments kind of pissed me off. But the Mike McDowell, he benefited a ton from the COT safety with his wreck at Texas.
Right.
10 years before, he would have been killed. As soon as he hit that wall, he'd have been done. And so that's why I kind of take a step back and say, well, are you sure? Because you haven't really been around this a ton.
Yeah, and I think that's the tough thing for me is that if you look at it from that perspective, you don't really want to see that because I think the atmosphere that NASCAR has sort of prided itself on would go out the window very quickly. Mm-hmm. Like you look at stories of drivers back in those older days when it wasn't really a safe sport at all. they would talk about, hey, we don't want our kids to be at the racetrack. We don't. Enzo Ferrari would say, hey, I don't want to get to know my drivers on a personal level because I know they're going to get killed anyways. I don't want to form any bond with them because it's easier to lose them. Like, you don't want that to happen nowadays because it would almost lose everything the sport's gained. Like, nowadays, you can go to a race and you can have a good time, whereas back then, or even in certain situations where it's not going to be safe going into it, you don't want to have to say, look, this isn't something that a kid should be watching.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to name a farm animal because you get attached to it. You don't want to pick a favorite driver.
You want to be able to get attached to something, I think.
Bingo.
If you knew going in that, hey, look, this isn't – you might not have a favorite driver in a couple of weeks, there would probably be a lot less people that are maybe my age or below that are into the sport.
Yeah. Alex, what do you got?
You want attachment.
Well, before I get into my stuff, Jared, do you have anything as far as this conversation?
We just keep leaving you out, Jared. I'm sorry.
No, it's just because y'all keep talking over him. Like, he looks like he's about to go, and then you guys just start talking. But that's all right. As long as the conversation is good, I think we're all right. But, Jared, do you have anything as far as this?
They basically covered everything I was thinking. Like, you don't really want to take your kid and watch, people die left and right. Like, that's just going to make them like, oh, I don't really want to be a race car driver or something. Like, you look like we haven't had a death in 20 years. So if everyone's like, as kids growing up, they're like, man, I think I could be a race car driver. It looks super safe. So, but you guys basically covered all the points I was thinking when it came to that subject.
Right.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of books actually that I have that talk about that. This one right here is from F1's former doctor that was in the medical car called
Sid Watkins. Yeah.
On the Limit. Yeah, Sid Watkins. He's not alive anymore, but he has wrote a couple books that are really good. They're very interesting because he was one of the first people that was kind of instrumental in the safety revolution. He was one of the first people that was hired to do that. And there's another one called Rapid Response. If you don't have the book, you can actually watch a documentary. I'm pretty sure it's available on most streaming services. You can just rent it for a couple of bucks or whatever. It talks about how back then it was crazy unorganized, and sometime down the line in the 80s, they're like, hey, maybe we should have doctors here, or maybe we should have a safety team that knows what they're doing. Maybe we should train these people. And eventually it goes through the progression to where racing is today. And if you look at that, I think that progression has a lot to do with racing being a fun sport, because I think it's just more and more difficult. The more and more dangerous it is, the less and less family enjoyable it would be. Because if you go and ask any of these team members or doctors or drivers or anyone that actually worked on the safety teams, that kind of stuff, like, oh yeah, like they wouldn't recommend their own kids to go to it for a while. And now it's like they basically worked so that they don't have to do this stuff again.
Yeah. And to that point, I will say the Michael McDowell quotes kind of pissed me off. When I go into a racetrack, do I want there to be crashes? No, I'm not that kind of fan. Do I understand that there are fans that go to races for crashes? Yes. Do I know that having 40 cars on a circular track are going to lead to crashes? Yes. Do I know that there are mechanical failures that I don't even know are going to happen to these cars that will cause crashes, whether it's a right front tire blowout or a brake explosion or just anything in between? I mean, we saw the gearbox get stuck in Juan Pablo Montoya go through the back end of a jet dryer. Just anomalies like that. Do I know that these crashes are going to happen? Yes. Do I think about it? No. You want to know why? Because the drivers are safe in the cars that we have now. If I go to a racetrack and I think about the fact that someone could die today, I'm going to be a little bit less willing to go into that racetrack. And so when you tell me that we're in a sport that goes over 200 mile an hour, maybe not anymore, but we used to, a lot more than we do now, at least. I can't look at a wreck like Ryan Newman's wreck and think that he would have died without some of the safety features. We put that Newman bar in 2003 because of his wreck at Daytona. We put another bar this year in after the wreck last year at Daytona. If you don't want to go to a racetrack after an accident that in a car that's safer for those particular set of circumstances, you're an idiot. I don't care that there's inherent danger in racing cars. If you're going 100 mile an hour, you could die. Like that's just a given. I can't stand the fact that someone would say, "Oh, that's it. That's what we do." I wouldn't do this if it wasn't dangerous. That's some bull fucking shit right there. I'm sorry. When I go to a racetrack, of course there's inherent danger, but I don't think in the back of my mind. I think that I'm going to watch a good race. I don't think I'm going to watch someone die. And that's my biggest thing. If I go watch a sprint car race, which I haven't had the enjoyment of doing other than some of the smaller tours, I haven't seen a 410 sprint car race. I know that there's a good possibility that someone's going to die. But it is so slim that I'm willing to take that risk, right? So when we have a Hans device come out and drivers are hesitant to do that, that's stupid in my point of view. And that's what happened, and that's why we lost Dale Earnhardt. And, you know, if we got guys going out there that, like you said, smashed the wall and rolled down a hill in a COT that would have killed them if it was the generation before, saying that they're basically okay with dying, that's ridiculous. You don't do that to your family. You don't do that to your friends, and you don't do that to your fans. You don't do that to the people that put money to put you into that car. It might happen. It might happen every time you strap in, but do not sit there and say out loud, "It's dangerous. Somebody could die." Oh well, that's soulless to me.
Right, and I think part of it from my perspective is, you know, it's never gonna be safe, but I do agree with what you're saying, that it's probably not the smartest thing to say. But you know, it's kind of sad that it is part of it. I think the one thing that really made me think is that people say that we don't think about what could happen because it doesn't happen. I think that kind of leads to some of the boneheaded driving that you've been seeing lately at Daytona and Talladega with the blocks. They know that they're probably not going to get hurt, so they don't drive like it. And I think you kind of see that nowadays. You see like, that's what Hamlin was upset at Logano with Fontana in 2013. He's like, hey, Joey drove like he couldn't hurt me, and he ended up hurting me because he didn't think he could. And it's like,
yeah,
people these days that actually know the consequences of it. So it almost is kind of humbling, because you think about it anytime. It's like, I could get in my road car and go on the highway and I might not come back. You know, that's just it's unavoidable. It's life. But if you look at it from that perspective, it's interesting, because that almost goes to show you that there have been drivers and people in the sport that they don't necessarily understand the consequences enough to really think before they're saying or think before they're doing. And I think that's probably just another case of that.
Right. And to the McDowell's comment, I mentioned this in our group chat that we have for FanFuel, saying that, racing's dangerous. You know, if I'm safer in the stands than I am in the car, then, or, you know, if I'm just as safe in the car as I am in the stands, then I wouldn't be a driver. Like, maybe we don't need you as a driver, dude. Like, sorry. That's like going back in the 50s and saying, well, if flying wasn't dangerous, people wouldn't drive. It's kind of a lot the same to me. I mean, I saw Rattlesnake bring up the point in one of my mentions that, bull riding's dangerous. Okay, I don't watch bull riding. I go to rodeos every single year. I go to the world's largest outdoor rodeo. I leave when bull riding comes on because I don't want to fucking see that. I know there's tons of people that go to see that, but I know tons of people that are in the arena that empty the arena when it happens. And I know damn well the same thing's going to happen with racing.
Right.
You know, and it's dangerous. It is. But I mean,
wants to see someone
when I hear someone say, like Chase Elliott, like, I'm going to drive whether it's safe or not, that brings me back to Labonte in 2000, right after Kenny Irwin was killed. That I'm going to drive whether it's safe or not. Guess what happened that next February? We lost our biggest icon in the sport, and everyone started paying attention to it, right? I almost feel like we're either on the verge of a strike, or we're going to be in that same boat of something's going to happen, and it's going to make all these drivers aware of, oh shit, this really can happen to anyone, not just the Tony Ropers, not just the Adam Pettys, the young kids, right? The Kenny Irwins. This can happen to anyone.
Right. And I think
that's what I think a lot of these drivers don't get, is it's not going to be BJ McLeod. It's not going to be Quinn Huff.
It's going to be everybody.
It's going to be a Denny
And I
Hamlin.
think-
It's going to be a Kevin Harvick. It's
Right.
going to be someone like that changes the sport around
Right.
because they got hurt. And when I think of Denny's interview, to your point, Nate, after the Logano wreck at Fontana, Denny was emotional after that when he goes to his interview and says,
Right.
he hurt me. He knew what he was doing and he did it anyway. And I think of that with NASCAR in this next gen car. If it is as rigid as the rumors led out to be, NASCAR hurt me, and that's what
Right.
I think as a fan.
And I think, let me preface, I guess, before I say anything, I think if I would try to say this in like the smartest way I could, just because I am okay with the dangers of racing doesn't necessarily mean that I want to be a part of the dangers of racing. Like say, like whatever, hey, I'm fine racing what I am now, but maybe next year I'll be in a shifter cart that doesn't have a seatbelt. It doesn't have a neck collar. It doesn't have any of that stuff. It doesn't even have a roll bar. And am I okay with getting hurt in it? Yeah, I signed up for it. Like that's part of it. I can't really, do I like it? Absolutely not. Like every time that I were to get into something that I know is fast, that I know has danger in it, the faster things that I get into that they don't have any of the safety comforts that you would normally want. I don't necessarily like that. I don't think I would say that, I don't really care, I could get into something that goes a lot quicker than what I would normally drive and not have those things. And I would probably say, am I okay with getting hurt? Probably, because I know that I'm taking a little bit of a risk by signing up for this. But at the same time, I don't necessarily enjoy the danger aspect of racing. I never really have. I do think about it every time I get into something that I might be in a little over my head, whether it's a 206 cart or it's something maybe next year that I'll be driving that goes 3 times as fast. I do think about that stuff and I'm like, man, I really don't want to die, but there's nothing I can do about it. So I think the best way to put it is, even if you are okay with that risk, you should still not want to have to go through that. You should never have to say, oh, well, to those kind of things. Like, it's one thing to accept the risk. I mean, every driver does, whether they like it or not. Even the most outspoken drivers that are all for safety, they still take the risk. I don't think McDowell is any different in that regard. I think it's the fact that what he's saying is that he doesn't necessarily care if he gets hurt or dies. I wouldn't necessarily go that far. Like, no matter how far I go in racing, I wouldn't necessarily say that. Like, I just don't. I don't necessarily enjoy the fact that I could get hurt. I just have to suck it up. Like, I would never say that I don't care if I die. Like that. I don't know if I go that far.
Yeah. So the problem with that comment to me is that doesn't just affect Michael McDowell.
Right.
That affects Michael McDowell's family. That affects Michael McDowell's friends and fans and supporters.
Right.
But not only does that affect those people from Michael McDowell, it affects every other one of the 39 drivers that he's racing with. Because if he's got the ability to die, well, guess what? They do too. And so now you're talking about 40 people with 40 families, with 40 extended friend circles, with 40 support groups from a technical and sponsorship roles, and 40 groups of fans. And so now you're not just affecting one singular person, you're affecting millions. We have millions of people that put forth effort to this sport, whether that's someone who drives a car, puts a tire on a car, supports a driver as a wife, or is sitting on their ass in their bedroom right now talking on a podcast.
Right,
So,
and I agree with that.
Exactly.
Because what you were saying is that it's a family sport, and I think that the more dangerous you go, the less willing family members would be to want their family member to participate in any racing activity. Because I remember having this talk when I was like 12 years old and first starting in Go Kristen, and I was like, hey, are you guys going to let me do this? And I remember like my mom and grandparents were they were thinking of that, like they were the biggest against it. And I kind of had to tell them like, hey, look, the sport's gotten a lot safer. It's getting better. It's not like I'm not going to guarantee you that I'm going to be okay, but there is a decent chance that I'll be okay. Like I'll be safer than you would think. But but all of a sudden, if people started dying, then I don't know if they would let me do something like that. I think from that standpoint, like I remember them saying, hey, why don't you do car racing? Isn't that safer than go-karts? And I'm like, well, I don't have the money to race cars. So I technically will be racing something that's probably way more dangerous than I would want it to be, but I don't really have any other choice because I don't have the money to go race a car.
Well, we are now 2 hours and 10 minutes into this. This has been our longest show ever. We're kind of ending on somewhat of a somber note, but I appreciate all of you who've been watching, who's been listening. Maybe you've had us on in the background or not. We're going to do picks on Twitter. We're going to go ahead and sign off today. I want you guys to think of your favorite drivers, their families. And in this time where we could really see something really bad happen, try and get in on the boat. Let's get NASCAR opening up about safety of this next gen car, and let's do what we can as fans to prevent anything from happening to our favorite Warriors on Sunday. And with that, do any of you have anything to say as a final thought?
Yeah, I got a quick shout out. I saw him comment here. 3B Hall commented. He commented on my hat. I know, Jared, you got to go. B Hall's a friend of mine. He runs the Scrubbin' Tires podcast, so I wanted to give him a shout out. He's probably working on a Grand American Modified right now as we speak with his buddy. So thank you, Hal. Thank you for chiming in, Brandon. Thank you, Dakota, and everyone else for chiming in. I know we saw May leave a comment here as well. This was a long show, but we had a ton to unpack, so thank you guys.
Yep, thanks to all our followers for following us along. Like, this is the longest show I've ever been a part of, and I think we got a lot. I think we got a lot of topics covered, and I think it's definitely we picked each other's brains on the different subjects, and it's just crazy how it's really good for us, us podcasters and stuff, because this isn't stuff you see on Race Hub or whatever, because they're just talking about the upcoming week or stuff not like this. So I think that adds our value. If you want to hear fans' opinions, check us out. So.
Yeah, I would agree. That's probably the most I think I've ever talked in a year. I'm usually not a talker. If you catch me in real life on, something that doesn't have to do with racing. So if you ever meet me in person, you might be disappointed. I don't normally talk this much.
Yeah. So we had fun the beginning of this podcast, delved into some really important stuff. And, like I said, a little bit somber note to end on. But it was a very in-depth and good discussion, and I think it needed to be said. And if you are listening, help us out, retweet this and get some of the words out. Let's get some of those guys that watched the video that Nathan posted and get them in on this conversation. I know it's a 2 hour and probably 15-minute long episode of Fan Fuel, but this one was. It really was fueled by fans. We needed to have this conversation. I think all of us needed to debrief a little bit after yelling at each other and with other fans on Twitter over the repave, the safety issues, and everything. So appreciate you listening this far. We'll see you next week. We'll probably be streaming again. Thank you, Jared, for coming on. Thanks for the help lately with all the digital stuff. We, of course, do have a lot more coming down the line with you, and go check him out on his podcast, the Fourth Gear podcast. And we'll let you know what's going on soon. Just know that the playoffs are coming, and so are we. So we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for listening as always. All right, bye.